We didn't just suddenly wake up one morning and we had the Xbox. We didn't wake up one morning and the internet was there. You know, how did we get there? That's what you want to know about history for.
Oh, are we ready to roll?
Yeah, we're rolling.
What I have next to me is the first bulletin board in the world, CBBS Chicago. People wondered if the C stood for Christensen or Chicago or whatever, and no, it didn't, because there was no such thing as a BBS, so it was a computerized bulletin board system.
I would enthusiastically describe it to everybody. I'd be telling, my relatives, I'm like, so this is, I would dial up and I'd be talking to other people online, but not really talking, I'd be typing and leave the messages, and then later I can read more messages, and they all go, oh, okay, and they look like you've got some sort of disease or something.
I say it's kind of like America Online, but really scaled down, And it's not an easy thing to explain.
With this program you'd have on your computer, you'd dial a number, and you'd enter your name and password, and it would say hello, and then you could go to the messages, and you could read these messages. And then you could add one. And if you waited long enough, and I had to say months, other people would have called in and left messages, and after a few months, you have a conversation. And they're like, why? They were all in their early 20s, and it's like, well, that's stupid. I mean, and it is stupid. It was unbelievably stupid.
I try telling it to people now, I'm like, imagine AIM is down, and all of your buddies are gone. Your buddy list is empty, and you can't talk to anybody. And there's no email. And people don't quite get how bad that would be.
In a way, it's the next generation of things that have always been around.
The way the early telegraph stuff worked was they would have people walk into the counter and they're leaving all these messages, handwritten messages, and someone goes over to the punch and they, with two fingers, punch a tape that's got the message, and then the guy in the back room of the office puts a little header on it. I've seen pictures of there's a rack with the tapes hanging from them, like dog leashes on a coat rack. And they tape them all together, and they put them into readers, and they're all transmitted over to some central routing place. And then they'll look at the numbers and they'll say, oh, this one, it's got the funny little codes that says OAK for Oakland. And they would put the tape in the right reader and they'd route. So they do manual routing. So yeah, there's hardly any new things. I'm sure these guys were sending stuff not for customer consumption. Because we know, because I have a lot of teletype in Western Union documentation and machinery. And we know that they inserted inter-office messaging in the stream. There's meta messages in the stream. How could they not chat?
Science fiction fandom going back to the 30s, people would use Mimeo or Ditto to publish fanzines, to publish their own newsletters with reports of conventions they went to, or book reviews, or just what's happening in their life, to talk to other people who are similar, who have similar interests, but might not be around them. One of the few really nerdy science fiction fans in your school, well, there's not many other people you can talk to, but if you find that there are people somewhere else that you can talk to, and you subscribe to their fanzine, and then you start writing letters of comment back to it, and then you decide you want to start publishing your own because you've got a lot to say, and it's just this innate human need to form communities and to find other people with your interests.
Joining us now in the studio is Luba Levitsky, Educational Programs Marketing Manager with Control Data Corporation. Luba, we've heard about the Plato system from Control Data for a long time. What is Plato? Give us a little background on it.
Basically, Plato is a highly interactive, graphic-based, individualized, computer-based education system. And by individualized, I mean self-paced, and the instruction is tailored to the needs of each individual student.
Okay, you're online now with Plato on a chemistry lab experiment of some sort, and show me what this does.
Basically, this is a simulation of a fractional distillation experiment, and it simulates operations and processes of an actual experiment Prior to this screen, the student has already touched the screen and assembled the distillation apparatus as they would in a regular experiment. The objective is to heat the still and to obtain a pure mixture of two chemical compounds.
Lee Felsenstein, who was essentially the inventor of the portable computer, ran this project in Berkeley called Community Memory, which was essentially a free BBS that was available in laundromats and things like that. And it was a real meaningful attempt at giving the population at large a way to communicate and online.
A lot of inventions aren't, an invention where one person comes up with an idea and goes off and builds it. A lot of inventions are where there's some idea that's becoming current. The technology's gotten up to a point where it's going to support it. A lot of people know there's a problem. A lot of people are working on it in parallel. A couple of them will come up with solutions. One of them will be able to get commercial success out of it. And, so Thomas Edison's the one we know as the inventor of the light bulb. The other people who were working on it at the same time don't get remembered.
Randy Suess and Ward Christensen were, we think, as far as we know, the first ones to establish a bulletin board.
1974, I learned about microcomputers, and the 8008 was out at the time, and asked what I needed to know and got into digital electronics. And in 1975, the January issue of Popular Electronics had the Altair computer on the front cover, and I thought, oh boy, I don't have to design and build my own computer from scratch. I can actually buy a kit and have the fundamentals. And I didn't do it right away because I didn't want to be the only person with one. Hard to believe that that's now as universal as they are. So I went ahead and bought an Altair. There was this computer club that was meeting in the Chicago area, and CASH, the Chicago Area Computer Hobbyists Exchange. And that's where I met Randy, and he was the real hardware jock.
I was looking for something more to do. And then this damn thing called a computer came along. I had a F8 development kit. This is back before there was any idea of there being a personal computer. It was a little circuit board with a processor. I hand-coded things that would add from 1 to 10 and divide by 7. It was just absolutely amazing that you could make this little thing do that.
We said we had our own computer. Wow. Everybody's jaw dropped.
I went to a Comdex show where Intel had a booth, and for $300 you could buy a 8080 CPU right off the floor. And I took that home and showed it to my wife, and I said, honey, look at this. Do you realize what I can do with that?
You can see how seductive this must have been, because to have your own computer, I mean, it was really amazing, given that they were multi-million-dollar things that you had to share with everybody else. The idea of having your own was pretty seductive.
We had a unique problem amongst us that we couldn't exchange software through the various media formats that everybody had derived independently. There was not one standard available between things like processor technology sols to Altairs to IMSIs to Chromemcos. It was just chaos.
January 16th, 1978, I went out to go to work, and it had been snowing most of the night, and I was unable to get out because it just kept snowing and kept snowing. So I think I shoveled for like 2 hours and probably came in at like 9:30, 10 o'clock and realized I was not going to work that day. So I called Randy and I said, you know, I've got the computer club recorder where people can call to find out when the next meeting is and to leave questions and things like that. And why not take that line and put a system on it that people could upload newsletters and things like that, newsletter articles and so on, and we could do a club project. And I remember he said essentially that sounded like a neat idea, but forget the club, because you know what a committee run something will be. It'll take it forever to happen.
I had too many years in the Navy to know. No, let's not talk about it. Just do it.
The two of us will do it, and you do the software, and I'll do the hardware. And tell me when are you going to have the software ready? You know, like a project manager.
The reason everything worked out so well is that we just kind of inherently understood each other. He let me do what I did. I let him do what he did.
It took me about 2 weeks, probably about the end of the month, before I had some software ready to test. And a little bit of playing around and let a few friends know it was there and try it and get some early feedback on things that it needed. And basically after the 2 weeks of designing and testing and put it online and refined it a little, and we called it a month. So February 16th became the sort of arbitrary birth date of it. And it happened so quickly because of Randy's brilliant initiative in pulling it back from being a club project, which would take forever and would be something more like the ARPANET that I had been in, which had a lot of people talking about a lot of good ideas, but nobody was just getting down and actually plugging in their soldering irons, so it wasn't happening.
The whole BBS thing was for our computer club to be able to produce newsletters. That was the whole idea of it. It worked. From wherever it went from then, fine.
And that's how this beast came out of it and ran for many years. And I don't claim to have done anything special. And it was sort of like if you bring two more than half critical masses together, it's going to happen. And that was what was happening to the technology at the time.
I found Ward's system originally, CBBS Chicago, mentioned in an article, if I recall, it was in InfoWorld. And I went, that's cool. And I called it. And played around on it and went, that's really cool.
Used to read 80 Micro magazine religiously every month. And one month they brought out an article on bulletin boarding.
We talked about it a lot at the local computer club. And a lot of them had seen the stories on Ward's system. It seemed like the same day we turned the thing on, it got its first phone call. And from there, just, kept going. CBBS Northwest, isn't that a little pretentious? You're kind of claiming this whole region, and you're this one system in this podunk section of Oregon. I said, well, hey, when I named it, I was all there was, this side of San Francisco. So
that's when I got up on Bill Blue's Bellflower RCPM, and he had the big bulletin board list, which at that time was about 100 bulletin boards. Downloaded that list and started calling bulletin boards around the country, and it was always exciting. You never knew what was going to come up.
Within 2 years, there was easily 200 to 300 phone numbers that you could call into the RCPMs, the RBBSes, the CPMNet guys.
We celebrated 100 calls. It took us almost 3 months to get 100 calls on the bulletin board because nobody had modems.
Very few people were in it, unless they either were active professionally in a related industry or perhaps had a lot of spare money.
In the first phase, everybody was a computer hobbyist.
You know, I'm one of these guys that my first computer came in a kit, cost me $3,000 in 6 months to put together.
And you had to roll your own back in those days. An Altair 8800, really, boy, that was a machine you really had to build from scratch.
It started becoming a surprise when I could find some of the parts that used to go into computers that show up at Radio Shack. Wow, you know, what's the world coming to?
Well, the system operators in town were not computer hobbyists anymore. They were just, they would go out and buy or download a program, put the thing up. They had no idea how to program. They weren't interested in programming, which was fine. That was, the interest had changed from computer hobbyists to computer users.
You could buy a TRS-80, download your friend's software onto it, and now I'm a BBS. No, they didn't have to know a damn thing. All they had to do was have a phone line and they could say they were a SysOp. High schools were full of SysOps.
It's Crazy Eddie's greatest home computer sale ever, and Crazy Eddie's going home computer crazy with the absolute lowest prices anywhere on anything and everything in home computers. Atari, Texas Instruments, Commodore, even the new low-price Timex Sinclair. Crazy Eddie's got them all the latest software too. Shop around, get the best prices you can find on home computers, then go to Crazy Eddie and he'll beat them. It's Crazy Eddie's greatest home computer sale ever, and Crazy Eddie's going home computer crazy. Crazy Eddie, his home computer sale prices are insane.
Well, one summer I'm saving up my money for a jam box, you know, because I'm a teen and that's what you do. And I had a friend who took me to play computer games at this comic book store. I was a big comic book collector, and I read in a Superman comic where they had one of these sponsored insert comics inside the comic book. It was these two kids helping Superman fight some weather demon or something by using their TRS-80 Model 100 computer in some capacity to help them. And I came home and I said, you know that computer you've been telling me you wanted? We're going to get one now, and I'm going to put my money from the jam box towards this. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, that this computer actually was so powerful, it helped Superman.
I sold my Atari 2600 in a box of cartridges to get my VIC-20. And because of that, well, you know, I can invest in video games forever, but this is a computer.
I think my dad got it because it made him feel like my kids are smart. And so instead of getting them toys for Christmas, I should get them this.
I used to copy and trade video games with my friends, which led to one of my buddies saying, "Hey, do you know what a BBS is? And they're, you know, you can get games for free and all this stuff on these boards." I mean, all I know is pirate BBSes.
Of just like the idea of like I'm talking to people and they could be anywhere and I don't know who they are. That's really neat, even if a lot of them turned out to be really boring.
The evening of December 25th. You could, you know, for years you could see, you know, some of the boards just got clobbered.
Oh my God. Forgot it's the day after Christmas. We're not going to get on any boards today at all.
In fact, I think a lot of people actually use this as one word. 12-year-olds who got a modem for Christmas.
You had this mass of new callers that had no clue. And I know a lot of boards, mine included, a couple of years, we'd actually close the system down to new users for the first 2 months out of the year. Go cut your teeth someplace else. We don't want to hassle with it.
For those of us who'd been there for many years, who'd had lengthy conversations as well as all the different types of interaction that had happened there, the sudden influx of Van Halen rules messages and the message counts just went through the roof because they were all very short, one sentence, me too kind of messages.
Their behavior just wasn't very adult-like, and they would really mouth off and bash people and steal their code. And
yeah, a lot of them were just pure anarchists too. You know, they just love creating chaos.
It gave us a voice that no one had before. We had no idea what to do with it. You took sticks of dynamite and handed them to 12-year-olds and said, now if you can find the lighter, you can make this go boom. And, well, we found the lighter.
There was a serious rift between any of the 8-bit users, between Apple, between Atari, between Commodore.
I refer to them as Ford versus Chevy arguments. there was always this big argument between people who thought Chevy was the best car make and people who thought Ford was the best car make, and there were always this rivalry and this fight between them for what seemed like a completely pointless thing.
People get really, really heated. They get very, very defensive of their computers. It's not like you go and you buy a stereo or you buy a blender or a toaster. A computer is a very, very personal thing. It's an expression of how you want to work, how you want to do things. It becomes an extension of yourself, and you tend to protect your own.
Each had their own group of followers. Each group of followers was very faithful to the company they chose.
Well, Ataris were the best computers ever made.
Forget it. The Apple II was the only software thing in town.
The Commodore, I think, did more to get people into computers than anything else on the planet.
When you thought of Atari, you thought of the highest quality, the best games, the best of everything. So it made sense that, if they come out with a computer, God, it's got to be the best thing around.
The Apple was the ultimate hackable piece of hardware.
The Lisa was beautiful, so I fell in love with Lisa.
Tandy did have a great computer, which you maybe talk about, the Coco, the color computer.
64, it was everywhere.
They're great, because they're the coolest. You understand what's going on with an Apple II. It's not going to trick you. Nothing sneaky is going to happen on an Apple II.
They break down, you put them in the closet, and they heal themselves.
The Commodore is definitely the one that I have like 10 of them at home, just in case. I'll have one till the day I die.
And so they would invent in their own minds any justification to show that the other computer was a piece of crap.
You know, we used to call the Apple people the blockheads because everything was in
uppercase.
capitals. They never used their shift keys.
Oh gosh, we hated Trash 80.
And a TRS-80 guy would never own an Apple, and an Apple guy would never own a TRS-80.
I think I didn't like the Commodores, just the way they were shaped.
Actually, IBM was kind of like the enemy.
The Trash 80s were toys.
I remember seeing people, viciously attacking people non-stop in the message boards. They were people that I would actually follow a guy around and keep an eye on him and keep lashing out at him on multiple, bulletin boards. I mean, it got that serious.
If you were a Commodore user and you were on our bulletin board, it had to be because you told us you had an Atari or an Apple or a PC. We had zero tolerance for Commodore. And not for any practical reason, except for the fact that you have to delineate yourself from somebody else. We're the Commodore free zone, so that's what we were.
So that was probably where a lot of the emotion came from. It's like, why are you making fun of my computer? It's a computer just like yours is. But
this extended off of the bulletin boards, these wars, because you would walk into a store and you would hear some Commodore kid that would see somebody looking at an Atari computer getting ready to buy it, and you go, you don't want that. It's not powerful enough. It can't even run a disk drive. It can't run this. And I remember myself personally stepping up and going, and getting involved in that. And saying, you don't know what you're talking about. We have robotic arms, we have Corvus disk drives, we have this, we have that, we have all these sorts of things. And then you'd see the two people that were kind of looking at the computer to be kind of like, stepping back some way, like, okay, let's get out of here.
One of the local electronics stores had set up a BBS that they were running out of their electronics store on this Amiga. And, well, that just would not do. Right. And so various people at various times would go up to the store, and they would have this BBS just running on this PC, and they would disable that BBS. Just take it offline, remove the mouse ball, set it aside, or do something. So now they can't do anything on their computer. I remember him making threats against the SysOp of that. Now, he was 16 probably, and the SysOp was an employee of the store. And he's like, you got to take your board down, or something bad is going to happen. I remember him coming home and saying, I just followed the guy home from work, and I threatened him from my car and told him, you got to take your board down. And I'm like, what in the world are you doing? And so then we stole the mouse ball from this computer, and he posts this plea on the bulletin board. Anybody who knows where my mouse ball is, because this is a time when you can't get replacement parts for the mouse balls. Anybody who knows where a mouse ball is, please let me have it back,
the biggest advantage it had that I couldn't put this to words then, but the biggest advantage was I had one.
Being a natural pack rat, I got a fundamental problem with paying to throw things away. It's bad enough to actually get around to finally throwing something away, but to pay to throw it away, that just hurts.
I mean, like, for instance, you kept the manuals all this time.
Oh, yes, of course. What is it without manuals? I've got all the manuals up there. I got printed out docs to my most used shareware stuff. Oh yeah, keep the manuals. From where this thing got deposited, 10 or 15 years ago. No, 15 or 20 years ago, more likely. But to work with my K-Pro, my Signalman 300 baud modem, which when I got it, I thought was the greatest thing going, and even the speed didn't seem too slow, since the printer I had at that time was a 30 character per second printer, so they were both about the same speed. And I used this for a couple of years until 1200s finally became affordable.
Okay, you want to describe what this is?
Yeah, well, this actually was a custom cabinet a friend built for me. I had all these boxes of floppy disks. Each of these boxes holds 70 disks. Somewhere around here or so, they changed from 360Ks to 1.2 megs. Basically, these disks here, which numbers from 1 to 1800, are all shareware. This is all DOS, very little Windows, almost all DOS shareware that I collected from BBSes. Now, the entire contents here actually fits on 2 CDs. I've put it on 2 CDs. This station was about the most comfortable station for doing BBSes, because in the slow BBS days, it wasn't that interesting watching. It was about as interesting as watching a dryer dry clothes, watching the numbers count. So my little TV set was over there. So the children were younger then, and it was hectic upstairs. This was a place to get away from it all and do my BBSing with the printer right there and TV right there, and just sort of out of everybody's way. But
And
yeah.
how much would you say you spent on this setup?
I don't want to know that.
Listen to this. When a 20 megabyte drive for an IBM PC can be bought for under $1,000, the 2195 hyperdrive seems woefully overpriced.
The first hard drive that we purchased in our school system was a 5 megabyte hard drive from Radio Shack for a TRS-80 Model 3, and it cost $3,000. 5 meg.
Yeah, I remember buying 2 of these things, and I remember as I put them into my car after coming from the store, I thought, wow, the amount of money I spent on these double-sided 8-inch floppy drives, I could have bought a car with. Not a very good one, but a car.
I still have the paperwork on that Apple, and I look back at it, and it's like, we paid $3,600 for an Apple II and a printer and a monitor. And I'm just like, $3,600 now, I could, run half the country on the kind of computer you can buy for $3,600 now.
I went to work at Carl's Jr. I hustled on all sorts of jobs, and I had the choice of getting a car or getting a computer. And I got a computer. And then, the rest is history after that.
The first difference, the huge difference that's not, it'd be trivializing it to overlook, is the huge difference in speed. We're talking 300 baud. 300 baud.
I'm glad I will never have to again, and by saying this, I'm cursing myself. I'll never have to deal with 300 baud again.
In the bad old days, an acoustic coupler had 2 speeds. There was 110 baud, and there was a whopping 30 characters a second. 300 baud. And we thought that was pretty good.
300 baud. The screen wouldn't, you'd log into a BBS and it'd be like, log in, or username, : and you'd type your username, hit return, and it'd be a pause, and it'd go, password. And just how long it took to draw that stuff alone, because of the speed issues, was torture.
When 1200 baud modems came along, the users all saying, you need to go to 1200 baud. And I said, 300 baud, that's reading speed. We don't need anything faster than...
And I was running a 1200 baud modem, and my shit just did not stink. I was so...
It was amazing when you actually connect to 1200. It was absolutely amazing.
Called one of the few in town that supported 2400 baud. One of the few boards in town. And it was awesome.
And you would actually seek out the places that had 2400 baud so you could take advantage of this high speed that you had.
Even if the place sucked, it was just like, whoa, but look how much faster it's coming through. This is so cool.
But I was always 3 lowercase o slash 12 lowercase o slash 24 lowercase o, because I remembered the early days when I wasn't allowed onto some boards because I didn't have high enough baud rate.
I remember the first time when I called up to a board and a SysOp pulled me in a chat and says, I got this new 9600 baud modem, man, and like, you're still at 2400 and it's sad. What's wrong with you?
I probably got like $800 for my bar mitzvah from various people. It added up to $800. I spent 650 of it on a 9600 baud modem, which I thought was a good investment. $650 for a 9600 baud modem, which of course as soon as I bought that, they dropped down in price.
And when I could get a 14.4 modem and download Doom to play with a kid who ran a BBS because he couldn't find anybody to play Doom with him, that was just a wondrous device.
One particular Saturday night, I'll never forget, I had company at the house, we were playing cards or whatever. This guy called my board and he's uploading something or other. And the next morning I woke up and he was still uploading the same program.
When you found a big file and it was across the country, you really thought about it whether you wanted to download it now or take a chance on finding it locally. Absolutely.
Anybody who is probably under the age of 30 or 25 these days has no concept of what the phone companies used to absolutely rape you for calling long distance. I mean, quite commonly, to call California during the day would cost you upwards of $1 a minute. And that was in the deflated dollars of the day.
I think the first month I got really into de-dialing, we got a $500 phone bill.
A lot of people like me did that and then ended up losing their telephone for a while because of the $650 phone bill for 1 month.
I mean, I never knew, right? I didn't know that BBSes that were also in 312 could possibly cost any more money than another one that was in 312. Till we got the first phone bill. My dad was very nice. He said, okay, this is a learning experience, but you're not calling during, prime time anymore, first of all. You're not staying online for 8 hours anymore, second of all.
I mean, I was the expert on what the phone book, in the yellow pages, if you turn to the front of the yellow pages, they had all of the plans laid out that you could get in Massachusetts.
So we actually spent time saying, okay, you can call where, and where can I call? Okay, now that means we now have a combined calling area of this much.
Pulled out page 17 from the yellow pages, which said, okay, if you live in this town, here's the, this is what phone numbers start with, that are local to you.
So we used to figure out exactly where the bubbles lied and where they overlapped so that we could make those calls.
So be like, okay, well, here's a page long of, numbers which I've got. All right, this one is 376. Okay, that one's good. Mark that off and I would call that one up.
And I actually had to call Illinois Bell, when they were Illinois Bell, and ask them for what they call a band chart.
After dinner, I would go to my little hideaway downstairs, do my BBSing to the local BBSes, waiting for 8 o'clock. Then I'd hit the crosstown ones. On the weekends, I'd get up before 8, before it went back, and do a couple. Oh, yeah.
It certainly has been. It's just been fun seeing the progression.
At this time, I can't believe BBS has ever ran on Apple II machines. Like, wow, that machine had like a megahertz, not like a gigahertz, like a megahertz, like one, uno.
I don't know. You know what I mean today? It's almost like
It's too easy. Today computers are too much like a computer and less like a typewriter, like it was back then. So, and you don't have. I miss the sound. That you're typing. You know you're typing.
It's gone from just building a computer that works is an amazing thing to, oh yeah, I can build a computer. I want to make one that looks neat.
Well, it was the beginning of a revolution.
Yeah, it really was.
Everything's been revolutionized since then. We don't typeset the way we used to typeset. We don't do photography the way we used to do photography. You got this fancy XL1 camera with FireWire and all this good stuff. I mean, it's.
I think there was a whole sense of adventure. We were doing something that had never been done before. We were taking hardware that had never been used for this kind of purpose and using it.
And when I go into it explaining what the BBS was about, why it existed, and what there was before the internet, everyone's just in awe. They're like, wait a minute, there was something before the internet? Like, this just didn't happen?
And it really just is a great way, or was a great way, to spend hours and hours of your time just doing it.
You know, the definition of a pioneer, that's the guy with all the arrows in his back. Well, that's the way it was for the BBS guys. They broke new ground. They really blazed, they created a new empire.
If it hadn't been for computers and technology, I would have probably died 20 years, 25 years ago, wrapping my car around a bridge abutment somewhere in Texas from drinking and driving or drugging and driving. I got into technology and I didn't have any more money for booze and for drugs. Those decisions have treated me very, very well.
And I remember the first time I logged into a BBS and thought, what the hell is this? And the answer was standing right behind my back. It was me 30 years later going, this is your life.
Off into the lair. Hope your Indiana Jones card is up to date. But, buried back here, under the piles, is the original CBBS Northwest system. Not in its original configuration right at the moment. I mean, I've still got all the cards, all the original cards, even the PMMI modem card is still rattling around in a box. But the original CPU, the whole thing, that box, for 13 years just sat there pretty much happily and took phone calls.
It certainly has been. It's just been fun seeing the progression.
The whole BBS thing was for our computer club to be able to produce newsletters. That was the whole idea of it. It worked. From wherever it went from then, fine.
Just loaded the BBS.
My brother actually used to say, "Oh, are we going to play loading again?" Because he was used to his Intellivision where he just pops a cartridge in.
I hate it because it's a stupid sounding word. We're system operators. We're not a shortened something or other. We're the people who are keeping the damn thing running. We're not SysOps.
I mean, I never called it system operator. It's not a system operator. It's a SysOp.
Oh, by the way, I say SysOp, not SysOp, so
Yeah, system operator, sysop.
if anybody's a linguist out there, just forget it. That's the way I pronounce it. Thank you.
Yeah, I must have said SysOp for years until I discovered I was being horribly gauche.
It was a big holy war back then.
That's how I pronounce things. If I saw something with a Y, I would say SysOp, co-SysOp.
Why did you go with SysOp?
I thought SysOp sounded too much like sissy.
My friends and I always said WizOp. I only say SysOp for the benefit of normal people.
WizOp.
WizOp was better than SysOp. I mean, come on.
Under a sort of mess of stuff. Is the old BBS exactly how it was, even missing the 6 key when I took it offline. I don't like throwing things away. And look, it has floppies in it. Seems to be. It's exactly like it used to be, because that's a slot 6 drive 1, the boot disk for T-Pro BBS.
When was the last time you saw it?
This? Out of a box like this. Well, this box, it's from a monitor that I bought 10 years ago.
I was sitting at lunch one day with my friend Mike at high school, and he was talking about this great new thing called a BBS. And I wasn't really popular in high school, so I was like, what is this? I was really into computers. And he said, oh, you can talk to people through the computer. And I was like, no. He's like, yeah, come over. So I went over to his house, and he started dialing up.
A friend of mine said, hey, try this number.
There's a way to communicate with people that involves this computer, and they're out there doing the same exact thing, yet they may not be local to you, they may be local to you. You may never meet them in person.
This is totally cool. I can, interact with another machine.
And at that moment, I was hooked.
This is for me. I have to get in on this.
I remember the first time I downloaded a program and installed it on my computer and ran it. That was amazing. Who would have thought you could install a program on your computer without putting a disk in it?
When I'd pick up the phone and I'd be dialing on that hideous rotary dial phone to finally get the number, after hearing the busy signal for a couple hundred times, finally getting a ring, and then going, oh, and then connecting, and then seeing this, the logon prompt. This adrenaline rush. All right, I'm getting on.
I dialed into that, and then on that message board, they had lists of other places you could dial into, and from that, I started dialing in all over the place.
The mystique was there. There was something alluring about just, staying up nights. It was something you'd do at night. It wasn't something you'd really want to do during the day because, everybody was up and you'd be bothered. But if you sat in front of the computer...
There was something special about calling someplace you had never called before, not knowing what to expect, logging in, exploring its menus, exploring the systems, trying to find the operator online and break into chat and talk to them about what the heck their system was about.
The fact that you could get out there to California or Seattle or Maine or Boston, and the minute it took you to dial a number, wait for a carrier and connect, and just be in someone's house or store or wherever this thing was.
So you dial in and
it's you hear the modem go, it gets little noises and it's whistling and stuff, and you're on. Bam! It's like, and there's no multitasking. It's like that's all your computer does. So you're like, you've got the whole screen, and you're there. It feels like you're going somewhere, like it's a place, like a journey.
It's like, this is brilliant. This is amazing. This is fantastic. I can talk to somebody through a computer without seeing them. They don't have to see me. I don't have to see them. We just talk.
You knew that someone said, oh, what do you do? Like, oh, I spent some time on BBSs. If you saw the light spark, you knew that was a person you could relate to. If you didn't, screw them, they weren't worth your time.
I guess the system operator, came out of the mainframe, and the operators in a mainframe environment were people of humble stature but great power. And the same held true of people who operated BBSs. I mean, you could do whatever you wanted.
And I forget if it was because I was posting something or I was having trouble figuring my way around since it was my first time. But he broke into chat, which completely freaked me out, because I don't even think at that time I understood there was a system operator, an individual running it out of his house.
The sysop requests your presence, and then you go into a split screen chat. And I remember the first time that happened, I was shocked. I didn't even know that could happen. Holy shit. He's trying to chat with me. What the hell's going on?
And so this guy breaking into chat to basically berate me, like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Who are you? What are you doing? What's your handle? And I was afraid that I was taking too long just reading what he wrote. It's very scary.
For the longest time, when I was using other people's BBSs, I would write everything very carefully, because I knew it was important not to say anything embarrassing and have to backspace it, because the sysop would be watching.
You kind of get this idea of what a system operator is. You try to chat with them and they're never there. They're like a cool person that's somewhere else. So I wanted to be a cool person.
The sysop is the cool one that all the users want to get to know and they want to be like.
SysOps were definitely treated quite well. There was a respect factor, and then there were people we would have BBS events and everyone would want to buy the system operator, all the beverages they wanted.
Hey, I actually know Jim. He's the sysop of such and such BBS. All of a sudden you sort of raised up in clout. Hey, I'm good friends with the sysop.
People, like users, would look up to you, like you knew a lot.
I mean, there is some God aspects to it, because you can read all the private messages.
I even got laid a few times because of the BBS. I'd meet a woman through the BBS.
And it was like approaching Mecca the first time I saw where the bulletin board was actually running, to actually log in at the console. I just thought that was the most amazing thing.
There was one I played, and it was like Adventure, an online adventure game, and it was like a 3 or 6 line system. I was used to playing Adventure just by myself, and I remember playing this game and going into this little valley, and it said, this person has just, entered the valley, and I was like, this is awesome. And I didn't know what to do next. And you could say hello to the person. And he's like, oh, hello, Steve. I'm like, how do I get to the house? And he says to me, follow me. And I didn't really understand until it said, Frank just went west. So I type in west and hit enter. And it says, you are on a path. Frank is here. And then it says, Frank just went east. Only me and like a few other people knew what was going on, because when I used to go back into work, they had no clue about, these kind of things.
I looked at my phone bill and said, gosh, I'm downloading these programs, I'm downloading these files, I'm spending my time doing this, it's taking forever, and my bill is huge. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute, if I set up a bulletin board, people will send me files and I won't have to go after them.
Right. I put the number out on some other boards, and then I finally put it up live, and I left with my friends, and I came back around midnight or something as a 15-year-old kid, staying out too late, and there was somebody on my bulletin board system.
I woke up, it's set up in my bedroom, and I woke up And I'm just lying in bed, and my eyes opened, and I saw the little light on the hard drive was flickering.
And I saw them typing messages, typing commands. I saw my floppy disk drive whirring, and I was just stunned that somebody was in control of my computer, and it wasn't me.
And it occurred to me, it dawned on me, somebody's using this now. This computer's not being wasted. I'm asleep, but someone's using it.
And that I had set up this service, and that was just totally defining and empowering to me.
Why we actually got into running boards in the first place is sort of a mystery. It was appealing to just to be in it, to be able to present something of your own.
I know I'm being taken advantage of. I'm being used by someone using my equipment, but the idea that I created something that people are using.
And then when I was in bed, and at night, and it was dark, and the screen was turned off, and I was just lying there, and I could hear the hard drive chirping away, making its little music, I could tell exactly where people were on the board based on the notes and the sounds that it was making. I could tell what door game they were going into, whether they were reading a message or posting a message, if they were just logging in or if they had just logged out. I could follow their progress through the board just by the sounds the thing made.
It was just a mind-blowing concept to me. They're in my bedroom right now with me.
The thing about being a SysOp was that you had this system, you designed it yourself, you set it up yourself, and while it was based on software, you had to do a lot of work yourself to get it working properly.
I was always at my computer. If someone paged me, they would get me. Like if it was 3 o'clock in the morning, the computer was beside my bed, so I'd wake up and talk to them. I'd always answer my mail. I was always trying to make sure that I had the latest up-to-date file bases, new doors all the time, that kind of stuff. I tried to keep people interested in the BBS.
I think I just liked running something and seeing people using it and maintaining it and watching just the communications. And
it was a labor of love. It was amazing that these people would build these these huge social systems on these tiny toy computers with floppy disks.
It was like the Wizard of Oz, where there's a guy behind the curtain, and those people never knew that there were two guys behind the curtains sitting there babysitting it, monitoring it, and they're requesting a file, and we're out there trying to find the floppy disk that has that file on it before the session times out, that we're flipping the disks in. And we would go out there and we really wanted to try hard, and we really did a good job on this little bitty insignificant thing. And it's not this insignificant thing that was so important, it's that we were proud of what we did. So I'm immensely proud of what we did.
If you didn't have fun when you were doing it, your site wasn't going to last more than 3 months. Because, the hardware's loud, the phone connection's expensive, you're pouring cash into it. If you're not having fun with what you're doing, you're out of it.
The person behind it, with the brains behind the whole project in a broom closet, was a woman who was deaf. And consequently, she couldn't talk on the phone. And we set up, somebody gave me a modem, and I can't even remember what type it was. I mean, it was a very 300 baud. And I set it up so she and I could talk. And she would call me or I would call her, and then you just sit there and type to each other. And that was the best thing since sliced bread for her. She was just thrilled with that, because this was the first time that she could actually hold a conversation over a telephone. So in 1987, she was the computer coordinator for the Worcester Public Schools, and I was one of the trainers. And she read a lot, and she had found in some magazine that there was a company out of Florida called Galacticom. And Galacticom offered a multi-user bulletin board system, a BBS. And they said, I think the price was $6,000. It came with 16 onboard modems. And she came to me and said, what do you think about this? I can write a grant. I have some grant money. And we could set something up like this. Well, again, I could see the potential of this and said, wow, this could be really something. But it was interesting because there would be groups that you would see, and they would start, at age 13. And they would be on maybe 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden they'd disappear and there'd be a new group coming in. We had some really quiet kids that just went kaflooey when they got on the BBS in the teleconferencing area. There was a young boy on there that was very, very popular, and he was like a freshman in high school. His father was was a teacher in the Worcester Public Schools. He retired recently. But this young fellow became very popular and then came down with cancer. And he eventually died. He passed away. And all the kids, of course, from all over went to his funeral and wake because they all knew him through this medium. His father asked me if I would go up to the hospital to visit him because he said he just wants to meet the SysOp of the broom closet. And it was like, a little momentary stardom, but I remember going up and meeting him and, and I just felt so bad because, he had the laptop there with him and everything, but I said, I know you're getting a lot out of this. And he says, I'm so happy that you had this for my son. He says it really, really made his last days easy. And that was worth it right there,
At the end of the day, it's the SysOp that is the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner. It's the SysOp who's the one who does the bans. It's the SysOp who's the one who tells people, this is what you're going to do, and if you don't like it, get off my computer, get out of my phone lines.
You were the king or the queen or whatever of your own little kingdom.
A bunch of them were very authoritarian and very, you're coming into my house.
One of the most common, inane, naive arguments I hear from these, engineer white guys say, this bulletin board is in my house. I will not have any swear words on it.
A lot of sysops got this protective feeling about their users, like they were my users. You were over here trying to steal my users,
That man he swears. He said something I don't like. It's in my computer, in my house. And it's like, don't run a bulletin board. It's like then banish. Then if you don't like what the newspaper says, don't bring the newspaper into your freaking house.
Oh, what's that guy doing over on your bulletin board? He's supposed to be on mine,
We must control everyone's bad thoughts. I must not think bad thoughts. And if you're thinking bad thoughts, we'll stop you from thinking bad thoughts. Rather than just going what the Europeans have learned because they are tired of having blood-soaked rivers.
A lot of those boards were run by adults, and they seem to be run by particularly anal retentive, control freak adults who were very specific about what can and cannot be done on this board.
My old boyfriend, my first boyfriend, Andy, he would break into your message. He would bracket what he was saying and write SysOp, and then he'd put in his commentary on what you were working on at the moment.
Oh, jeez.
And then you'd keep writing, and he'd break in.
When a SysOp drags you into chat,
right?
You're going along, and all of a sudden the board starts doing stuff on its own that you didn't tell it to do. You're seeing commands get issued, and you start hitting escape or trying to back up, and they get reissued. Next thing you know, you're suddenly in chat, and the SysOps go, "Hi there," and you're what did I do?
I had a lot of, control issues with my BBS. I would put the SysOp screen up and start talking to somebody, and if they were nice to me, I gave them special access. And if they weren't nice to me, I would, goodbye, kick them off.
And there were some people who you got to recognize and, oops, unplugged. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Modem must have reset.
You could do that. You could twit people. You could torture them.
If you act like a child or a teenager, and that's how your bird's gonna end up. It's gonna end up wild and out of control. So, in a way, it teaches you kind of leadership skills. And I never thought about that till now.
And many people, that's their power spot. You're at your desk, you're at your computer. This is my place. I've created my environment. This is my window to the world. And some of those people don't really want to get out and,
Flame wars have, been throughout history of computing. When you have different people's opinions and they can instantly react at a keyboard, you get flame wars.
One term we coined out here, I think, but it may have also been coined elsewhere at the same time, was 1200 baud misunderstanding.
You don't have the feedback on
keyboarded communications, and so that tends to amplify the flame quotient.
Somebody gets on and you start talking about this. Oh, you're a complete idiot. You didn't even do this. And like a T is not supposed to be capitalized. It's supposed to be this. And you must be the stupidest person in the world. You wouldn't say that to somebody if they were reading their paper next to them. You'd go like, I should capitalize that T. And that's it. And they'd look at you and you go like, oh, you should help me out. Okay, capital T. Now, anything else?
Some people just get just a joy out of, flames.
Well, I mean, we were fighting all the time. That was half the fun of it.
Good. When a person cuts loose like that, they've peeled back all the layers. Gives you a good look inside, and you get to know that person a little bit better, whether you want to or not.
Every board's going to have a couple of people that just love to start a riot.
Well, you'll see a fight between two people break out, and then you see the rest of the board come and get in on that fight, and then you see the original two people just sort of bow out, and then it gets into this huge conversation.
Well, you go on there, and it was very childish, very pee poo, just not piss, F you.
In the old days, you'd have these pedantic arguments where people would just get a bug up their backside about, you'd say, well, I've got a 2400 baud modem, and they'd say, well, that's not really correct, because baud doesn't equal BBS, and they would just lecture you to the point of, ready to put a gun in your mouth and pull the trigger because you couldn't take it anymore from just the whole techno geek thing.
So yeah, as a SysOp too, you have to be really careful to
diplomatic.
Yeah, to settle things like that quickly. Otherwise, your message section gets torched.
But eventually, when it got to the point where too many people dropped, the SysOp was worried about a lot of his good friends getting upset, or some of us who knew the SysOps better would say, hey, these guys are getting a little bit out of line. He'd cut them out.
People had complete freedom to be jerks. And there were some people who just never were. And these people became my very close friends.
Trade wars?
Trade wars, that's another good one.
Well, there's always Legend of the Red Dragon and Trade Wars 2002.
You go on the BBS and go, hey, cool, man, this is like free games.
Trade Wars was one of the first multiplayer games where you could actually compete against each other, blow each other up in a safe, sane environment.
Well, it was really the first large-scale multiplayer game that we had ever played.
Oh, it's a kick to play that game. That is a really fun, just raw strategy game.
You could see other people who'd been on the board who'd been playing, but they're not on right now, right? So you just see their ship, and you could attack at a certain amount, and that was about it. And then wherever you were stuck, and you knew your ship was stuck there for a whole day.
You're interacting with real people, lots of real people, not in real time, but once a day you could go and you could play your turns, and you were competing with all your friends, you were competing with a lot of strangers, you were trying to win.
Every night at exactly midnight I go down, I'm dialing in, and cruising around, sort of taking all the resources, kind of cleaning up on everything. And nobody else, as far as apparently nobody else was doing this on his board, so.
Every day it would be, I can't not log in today, I'll fall behind, I'll lose out. So we'd have to call in to make sure that we could keep our ship alive.
And that's really the key to enjoyable gaming for a lot of us, is playing real people.
And once you got online and had played, all the more reason to just talk.
I had this weird idea that somehow it was this pseudo-semblance of real life, and if I could apply the same methodologies that I was using to get a whole bunch of credits and get a really bitch-ass ship and do really well and own everything, that, hey, if I can do that in this little game that everybody else gets killed in, I'll have a nice car someday and a really cool job.
The concept of starting a bulletin board as a social connection point for gay people seemed like a pretty neat idea.
And my mom had just died and left me a few $1,000s, and I was looking for something noble to do it with. And so I thought starting a gay bulletin board might be a neat idea. And as it turned out, it was. I mean, it spread like wildfire here locally, and it was the way to connect with other gay people for many, many years. Even that short time ago, in 1986, there were an awful lot of isolated gay people, even in as huge a community as Washington, D.C., who just were so closeted and so inexperienced and so afraid to ask anybody else anything at all about it, that I became the person who was accessible and was the guy that they said, that they thanked me just over and over and over again for creating this capability for them to meet other people like them. Many of our early members told me in no uncertain terms, I didn't know that there were other people around that were gay. I've lived my life thinking I was the only person like this. And it was such a revelation for me to find a bulletin board where there are hundreds of other people who are just like me. I never had any idea. At the login process, there was always the opportunity to send a message to the SysOpt, even by total strangers who couldn't log in. And those are the death threats I got. Those are when the 12-year-olds logged in, and time after time. One of the things I did one year, I collected about a dozen of these death threats, and I mailed it out in our annual fundraising letter to our members, and quoted them, and said, these are the death threats that your SysOpt got during the last year. This is what we're trying to do for you. And I just want you to get an idea of what the real world is like. It was one of the best fundraising letters, one of the most successful letters we ever sent. And I've thought many times since, we really stuck it to those people who thought they were going to make it difficult for me. I used them. It worked.
I remember in the beginning, too, people talked about they were afraid that the BBSes were going to be sitting there and not communicating with other people. I found it quite to the contrary.
For several years, I was going every Friday night to this 24-hour coffee shop and hanging out with lots and lots of other BBSers.
Like every weekend, there would be some BBS would be having a get-together party.
Right.
And people would be getting together and actually doing stuff together in real life.
The BBS meetings was probably one of the biggest attractors for everybody. We used to advertise them for a month at least. The meetings were on all the BBSes together. Or sometimes there were particular meetings, for example, for a fundraiser for my BBS, Nopal BBS, or a fundraiser for another BBS.
From the time I was 15 or 16 on, I went to pub night for the Pinnacle Club, later to Mound 7, pretty much every week. It was weird if I didn't go. And that was quite a trek to go, because it was in a different city, and I didn't drive most of the time.
Damn, it was just a great social group, and I loved it.
At midnight, everybody had to go outside at the party, grab a bottle of beer, and just pour it over your head. It's one of those initiations that you do when you're 16, 17 years old. So,
you mean while it's cold? Oh, barefoot in the snow, full bottle of beer over your head at 12 o'clock midnight.
Of course, all these BBS girlfriends and boyfriends that came up. For example, my brother, he was 14 at the time. He was chatting with his 12-year-old. And there was all this hype. All the BBSs knew that they were going to meet in this party. So my brother got drunk in the party. His first time he got drunk, 14 years old, in the party that he meets this girl, which, by the way, was not very good looking for his taste, so he was not very interested in her and whatever.
I mean, we caused many a divorce. We caused many a people to break up. You can't even put a number on how many affairs were, happened off of our system. And there was, quite a few success stories of people that got together, that met each other on there, and are still married today.
Okay, I met my first girlfriend on at a Diversidile party. Oh God, that's where I met her, wasn't it?
It was actually how I met my wife. and I've been married to her for 8 years, and we got 2 kids. All because of the bulletin board. We were the social scene of Bakersfield.
I used to be too embarrassed for years about admitting how I really met him, but now, with the internet being so popular and people admitting on that all the time, I'm not too embarrassed by it anymore.
She had called my BBS, and I was chatting with her, trying to get her to just to meet her, and she didn't want anything to do with me. So eventually, she came to one of the BBS meetings that we were having regularly, and met her there. And she was going to the meetings, and I was going to the meetings, and she only lived right down the street from me. So I started to pick her up and take her, and a few months later, we started going out, and that was almost 9 years ago.
A friend of mine was grabbing me and pulling me out of the house to get out, right, and to get away from him. Just then my chat beeper went off on the bulletin board system. I looked over, and they were Sierra. So I'm like, just give me 5 minutes. Hop in a chat. 4 hours later, I had a date the next day, or we're meeting for lunch at McDonald's. I think a few months later we moved in together, and then here we are, like 13 years later, and married.
I think it was pure luck, and maybe fate or something, because it seems highly improbable that we would have gotten together under normal circumstances. Don't you think?
Yeah.
There's the age difference. Are you aware of that? No. Oh, well.
I was 23,
24.
going on 24.
Yeah, right. I was 40. Or 39 going on 40. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're 16 years apart. So, we already had rapport communicating on the bulletin board before I found out the difference in our ages. If I'd known the difference in our ages, I don't think I ever would have really seriously considered a romantic relationship with him just because. But then by the time I found that out, I was like, oh, well. It didn't really matter.
The perception of BBS was geek toy. You had to be a geek. And believe me, there were very few women into BBSes because they were geeky enough. They didn't see, the sense of sitting at the keyboard when they could just call their girlfriend on the telephone.
Yeah, socially it changed because all of a sudden there were girls. And, it was like amazing to have a female member on your BBS.
We, being me and my best friend, it's just like we got like tons and tons and tons of attention, but we took it for granted. It took us a really long time to realize, oh, it's because we're the only chicks. Oh, there's 2 others, but one's 40 and one's like 90.
But I never flirted for access.
No.
I'm just friendly. And let me tell you, if you're a girl online and you're friendly, people fall in love with you. And that's all you need to do.
Oh, yeah.
And they got into this argument over all it took was a female name. And if the person could pull it off, within 2 weeks, every male on the board would hit on her. And Ben was arguing, oh, no, that's not going to happen. And so VCXE created this female persona, logged in as a new user, and played it for months.
I would be signing up, and I would enter that I was female, and then suddenly I'd be in chat mode.
I don't have that same
That's right.
Yeah, the SysOp is breaking into chat.
Type F again.
Yeah.
That turns me on.
If we got like dissed by somebody, then we would show up as another girl or another 2 girls with other names, and like be like, like what are you gonna say? Like, I think you type cute. But like in whatever way that you let people think that maybe you have some kind of interest in them. Maybe it's the way that they run their board. It's so smooth, and they're always available to chat.
It's sort of like, why would a model be calling this BBS in Seattle?
That's what I mean. That's interesting.
But they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And he had, a log, essentially, he'd written down. And every single male user of that BBS had hit on him at least once in that 3-month period of time.
And people would always be sending me emails, but it wasn't something that maybe I did have fun with it. I had daydreams that I would meet like another female SysOp, and we'd form this super elite female hacking group and just kick everybody's butts. I mean, I would totally been open for that, and not only that, but it'd be like, my God, like another girl to like just share stuff with, to share the problems of being female and being the only SysOp and the stigma that's automatically attached to it.
I think that gender and sex are very often, well, they pretty much are always linked together, but I feel that gender is on a sliding scale, and that somebody, when they see my physical body, they draw conclusions about me that are not correct.
For me, BBSs were about community, because I didn't talk to people in school, I talked to people on BBSs.
These were people, again, within my little circle, my little city, my little high school region, my little school district region.
It's no different than a small town if you think about it. I mean, you know, that's what I was thinking. Even at the time, I'm going, oh my goodness, you know, we're all like a little itty-bitty town, and we've all grown up together, and everybody knows everybody. And so, of course, everybody knows when someone else picked their nose.
A bulletin board system, and the SysOp was female. She was married with kids and whatnot. Unfortunately, what happened is she had an affair with, you know, one of the guys in the BBS system. That came out pretty fast somehow, and her husband, to say was upset, was, you know, the understatement of the century. I still remember getting a phone call. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and I was getting picked up. So a couple of friends came over, 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, picked me up, and we went to her house. Because it was a very, very bad scene. We're talking about things flying in the air, you know, the whole 9 yards. And ended up, there was about 30 people who ended up showing up. And, you know, quite a few people holding him back, quite a few people holding her back, and quite a few people taking the, you know, the guy from the BBS out of the scene and packing up her stuff and putting it into a car and taking her to a friend of mine's place to stay there for about a week.
One guy dropped his bike over in Maryland one night and knew that he happened to be near somebody else's house who was a member of the board, and got in touch with him, and, you know, that guy got up at 3 in the morning and hooked up his trailer, and they went out and got this guy's bike. And so stuff like, when I heard about stuff like that happened, that was pretty cool, that people felt enough of a sense of attachment to one another that they would do stuff like that.
You know, in the old days of BBSs, if one member had a problem, everybody had a problem. One guy was going through a rough time. It wasn't unusual for half the members of the board to show up on his doorstep, bringing food and drink and music, and let's throw a party and cheer you up.
Most of the friends I have now are the people I met through the BBSs, so that part of it, you know, that social part of it is still there.
And there are people that I remember getting on our board that were 12 years old, and they're having kids today. You know, you almost feel kind of like a father figure in some way, to watch these people grow up, and you help shape them, and you saw the things they went through on the board as a teenager. Either they were battling drugs, or they wanted, you know, they considered suicide because they thought nobody liked them, and this and that. And see the people pull together and really raise these people and turn them out to be, you know, decent human beings is really something neat.
Matthew, how many memorial services, how many Doorside memorial services have you been to in the last 4 or 5 years? Way too many. But that's the power of the Doorside community. We lose a user, we lose someone. And it's like, hey, this is what happened. Memorial services are, we go. We're there.
I got sober through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
I found the recovery message base when I was two weeks sober, and I was ecstatic to find it because I was so comfortable online. I could share online stuff that I didn't have courage enough to say out loud in a room of people. I could type it to a monitor. And those people saved my life. They loved me in spite of how nuts I was. And I was nuts. On a big FidoNet Echo, you could get 1,000 messages a day, and who could read everything? In the recovery echoes, you read everything. You got to know people. You got to care about them. One time, somebody called Promises and didn't know anything about AA. Just knew that she couldn't not drink when she wanted to not drink. And we talked, and I helped her find a meeting near her house. She told me she was going to it, and she never called again. And you multiply that by a whole lot of times. It was a service. It was a being of service. It was a way to give back. And it was a gift. It enriched my life.
The thing for me that I really would like to get across is how much fun I was having at that point for a wide variety of reasons.
If I wanted to burn the bird, I wouldn't be in this house, I wouldn't have kids, it became my future, sure.
It was funny because I had a little wish list I used to keep on the side of my wall in my bedroom, and I used to have things like I want a mini bike, and I want this, and I want that, and I want a new Mac, and I always had a new phone line, and I always had my wish list, and to this day, that's the only thing that's probably not crossed off.
I think I ran the best BBS there was.
Yeah, people laugh about being able to read the modem lines, but I could tell, which two people were chatting with each other, or if they were downloading what protocol they were using, stuff like that.
I had an old man that used to call me once a day and play chess. He'd make a move and I'd make a move. And it was great. I had a user, he was in his 60s, was a grandfather, and he wrote me some feedback saying it was great being on your board. I have my grandson here with me and we're on your board playing games and just want to let you know we're having a great time. And that meant more to me than anything.
Yeah, in a way now it's kind of sad that it's no longer special. We don't have that special notion of poof. You're a person who can go into the room where the computer is. In a way, but we've won. We've won. Now everybody is using the computer, and the jocks are using computers too, so they can find out what the football scores are.
You know what your TBBS is capable of. But even power that is easy to control can be intimidating when you first try to use it. Fear not. While TBBS has power and flexibility to spare, with just a little knowledge and practice, you'll be well on your way to creating exactly the BBS you want.
Hi, I'm Phil Becker, creator of TBBS. We all remember what it was like to be that student driver and to feel that unique combination of terror and excitement. It didn't take long for driving that car to feel as natural as breathing, but on that first day, you probably wonder how you would ever do it. That same feeling returns every time we start to use any powerful new technology. And while the concept of a BBS is very simple, to design the multi-user BBS you want and make it operate reliably, you're going to have to control some of the most complicated aspects of the computer art. And once you learn how to use TBBS, you'll find that it leverages your power to design bulletin boards, the same way your automobile leverages your power to travel.
When bulletin boards started to, en masse, charge for their services, the controversy was free or pay, free or pay. And the free guys, the hobbyists, were outraged because the guys who got pay could afford better equipment, they could afford new phone lines. So these commercial BBSs started growing in power and in subscribership, and the hobbyist guys said, you know, this isn't fair. This was all started, this was like ham radio. We were supposed to be all just friends here, and you guys are breaking the silent pact that we had with the group.
That's where you lost the hobbyist aspect. And that's where you lost that heart that I felt was there. I did it. I ran a bulletin board for years just for the love of, look at what I can do. I can hook all this stuff up, make it talk, make it do all this. And then you always had somebody coming in going, how can we make money? If you're running a business, great. Tell me about it before. Tell me when I step in the door. Tell me when I log in that it's a business, because that way I'll leave, because that's not what I'm in it for. I'm in it for the information.
We've sowed the seeds of our own destruction, especially when the guys started wanting to charge money for bulletin boards. It was something that, you know, it was a hobby. It was my hobby. It was my computer. I was going to take that machine down. When I wanted to play with the computer, I was going to pull the plug on the modem. No question about it. And to expect somebody to pay for my hobby.
They weren't friendly anymore. They weren't people talking with people anymore. They were people talking with businesses. If you were to talk with somebody about something, you were talking to a hired mouthpiece. Basically, you're talking to people that have a policy and an agenda to speak, and that's what they're supposed to talk about, and it's not human anymore.
And they all wanted 15 or 20 bucks a month. You're going to rapidly run out of money. So I think the charge boards started the downfall of bulletin boarding.
And really, to be honest, I don't remember ever seeing a pay board that had anything unique on it. You know, like they had a gigantic selection of online games, or they had a gigantic selection of news feeds, or they had they had 20 lines or something like that.
There were people that were trying to charge to get some money back for it, but I wouldn't have paid to belong to a BBS.
For the most part, I didn't really see the services as benefiting the user. I mean, the idea, or at least for me, was to have a good time and to learn something. And if someone else can have a good time and benefit from that knowledge, then everybody's getting, you know, payment out of that, if you want to call it that.
I never charged a dime to gain access to the bulletin board, and I always said that the day I have to charge for it is the day I'd pull the plug.
There have been times when I've, gone to the pawn shop on the behalf of SDF to pay for phone bills and things like that.
I did have a couple of users that would actually send $20 every once in a while or something to help, just in general, to help keep it going.
A lot of bulletin board systems ran on donations. And even this one, when I booted it up the other day to take a look at it, it says, yes, please donate to the BBS, $1, $5.
The way I approached it was, for the first 5 years, I basically ran it as a freebie. Anybody that came on could not pay anything. From about 85, 86, and increasing from 1 line to 4 lines, and eventually up to 16 physical telephone lines, and having a 3-figure phone bill, I decided, hey, we're going to have to put some kind of price tag on people having unlimited access.
That really was the sole purpose of writing it. It was just for my own use. The fact that other people eventually became interested in it, and it did in fact get sold to some people, wasn't really part of my original plan. The idea was never to go mass market with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was only because I was at the right place at the right time with the right idea. That's always how it works in anything.
We packaged it up and sold the first 1.0 TBBS. I could not imagine at that time that there was a marketplace for it.
Originally, it was not built to sell at all. I didn't want to sell Synchronet at all at first. It was certainly not a commercial venture.
What changes your mind?
Well, there was SysOps that were like begging me to give me money.
I think I said 400 copies in 10 years or something like that. Well, it turns out that by the end of a year and a half, he'd sold way more than whatever my number was that I said at the time. And it was actually starting to make me some significant money on the side.
1989, that's when I left my day job and went to work for Clark Development and made it a full-time job for me. Prior to that, we were doing a lot of work on the site, after hours, during lunch.
People would send in checks. I was really surprised. I'd go to my mailbox and there was a check.
What we really found was that charging, what the product was worth, really, I think, inspired people to pay for it. Once they saw that we were standing behind the product, that we were putting it forward, supporting it, enhancing it, and so on, it portrayed the image that it was worth that.
No, actually in the manual it says at the end that we had dreams of being rich and famous, but we knew that we weren't going to be rich, so we may as well be famous.
ExecPC was a reasonable sized bulletin. Actually, it was a very large bulletin board system in those days. When I joined, I'm going to say there were probably 150, 200 lines and probably 8,000 customers. Bob Mahoney, the founder of ExecPC, would sell his used hard drives, and I would go over to his house occasionally and purchase one of his used hard drives. And so we got to be pretty friendly. So in about 91, 92, I got a call from Bob saying he'd like to talk to me. He said, I can never go on vacation because, I'm away from the system and, it'll crash. And it wasn't reliable enough that he could go away for extended periods of time, and he was actually burning out. So he said he was looking to expand his team. It was just he and his wife Tracy, and he made me an offer. I initially said, well, I'm going to have to think about it. And I drove home, and I remember standing up in my living room and saying, what the hell do I have to think about? That's exactly what I want to do. And I called him up and I said, of course I'm going to take this. There's no question that I want this job. It was like a dream come true. There were all these software guys that I hung around with in the Milwaukee area, and this was the dream job. We were having so much fun. I couldn't wait to get to the office every day. It was about a half-hour drive from my home here over to there, and it gave me half an hour to figure out what I was going to do the whole day, and I just arrived at the office with a big smile on my face every morning because we were in uncharted territory. We were doing some really cool stuff and having a blast doing it, and I was being paid reasonably well. So, I mean, there wasn't a happier guy in Milwaukee.
The whole economic model of having a commercial BBS was suspect, because you need to reach a certain critical mass before you can just keep it going. And once you start to grow, you need to get another computer, another phone line, another piece of software to run the next node. So you're taking yesterday's subscriptions to fund today's expansion. So unless you keep expanding and expanding and expanding, your business model just falls on its face.
We got a whole slew of articles, all kinds of magazines saying, this is the path to get rich quick. Start a BBS and get rich quick. All you have to do is buy a computer, which at that time was about $5,000. You buy this computer and you plug in a phone line and people call into your computer and they give you money for it. It's like you don't have to have any real skill. You just have to have a phone line and a computer and people will send you money. No, stop, wait. No, it's not like that at all. You've got to have a rather exceptional level of computer skill. You have to go beyond that to understand the software. It was not easy. What somebody discovered is if you put a few pictures of naked people online and have this section, this sex section of your bulletin board, people would pay money to get access to it.
Certain boards, not usually certain types, but certain boards would give you there was a feeling this board is pretty scummy, or the people on this board tend to be slimy in their business dealings. You just never wanted to do anything in business with them. There was always this vibe of, okay, I've just shaken hands with you and let me wipe the oil off.
The time when a BBS could charge, I think BBSes, when they did charge money, they were offering either porn or wares. And BBSes basically couldn't charge for anything else.
It really brought to my attention how big basically the porn industry was in the BBS community.
You know, you'd see it the few times that you'd see bulletin boards mentioned in the media, in the mass media, you know, in big newspapers and stuff. Probably half the time it was, hey, these seedy BBSs are places where guys download porn. You know, and that was the image that our business was getting from that.
My world at that point was I had an office, which is about 400 square feet. We had fluorescent lights. It took me like a year and a half to go out and buy a couple halogen lamps. We had a lot of computer equipment and modems and a bong and a refrigerator with beer in it and, 100 phone lines.
And I can remember at times I would take a call from a customer or something. Usually they'd sit there and say, well, your job is to sit there all day and work with bulletin boards? Wow, that'd be great, And I came up with a standard line eventually because I got that so often. I'd say, if my job was to do nothing but make love to beautiful women all day long, sooner or later I'd find something wrong with it. There's always a downside to anything.
Most of the time I spent behind my desk at Mustang was on the phone talking to people. Trying to figure out their problems and letting them scream and yell and gripe and moan and do whatever they needed to do to make them feel better about not getting the support they needed initially. I dealt with a lot of screaming people.
There was at least one episode I remember where a guy threatened to shoot me with his shotgun if I didn't fix a bug that he thought was my fault in Searchlight BBS. So,
was it your fault?
I don't remember. I mean, it was probably a bug, and maybe it was a bug, but I don't know.
You certainly
whatever it was, it wasn't worth shooting me for.
and you certainly probably weren't inspired by the threat of death to go through the code.
No, I think I just stopped taking that guy's calls.
I remember one customer in particular, he was, I'm sure, frustrated in that we were unable to duplicate his problem, even though it kept happening to him. And so he finally got out his video camera. He videotaped the problem in action, sent it to us, and bang, I mean, then we knew exactly what to do.
I remember sitting in my office saying, you know, I'd gladly trade 5% of my health to, you know, get to have this be a success, this release, and do sales and all that. And voila, I did trade 5%. I'm a diabetic now. So, you know, probably attributed to not getting much exercise and things like that.
And there was a time where all of us in tech support, we actually faked all the engineers into coming outside for a group photo. What we told them was going to be a group photo and turned into be a water balloon fest on them.
Yeah, we got you back though.
But to see it on the shelf of a store, it really changed things. It brought it into, created it into a business, and I think it got it into more people's hands, which exponentially grew the population of BBSes. A lot of people in growing up through school and stuff, talking about bulletin boards at school with people that I knew, they had no idea what a bulletin board is or why you'd have one or why somebody would even call your computer.
Yeah.
And once it appeared on the shelves, people saw, oh, I can do all this and more.
I can do that too.
And I think a lot of this has to go with the fact that, just bulletin board system development is something that anyone who is developing that software or having almost any role in those companies, they love bulletin board systems. I mean, it's something they felt passionate about. And to work on those sorts of projects, to be a part of making that happen, that doesn't just become a job. That really does become something that they pay you to do it. I mean, that's a really nice bonus. But if they weren't paying you, you'd be at home like doing this on your own anyway.
I think I probably had an exaggerated sense of responsibility, and it may have come from the fact that a lot of the customers were hobbyist customers, where it was, to them it was more than just they bought a product from a company. To them, they were sort of joining into this group or to this this faction of bulletin boards that ran Searchlight BBS.
So when we first started out, it was basically Fred and I working together, but then when we went full-time, we had a staff of 2 additional employees, I think, is what we had working out of his basement. And really, it was pretty humble beginnings. From there, we grew, I think, up to as many as 30 people at one point. And so, it was interesting to see the growth over time and say, wow, what we're doing is really what's driving the company.
I had a reaction to some of those kinds of trends going on in the industry. It used to be that I could call XYZ company and I could say, Henry, you got a problem. This is what's going on, and I can duplicate it, and you've got this bug, and Henry would go, oh my God, to where now, hi Henry, it's Peter. Oh, that's great, talk to my technical guy. You got shoved away, the old camaraderie of this small circle of people went away. When TVBS said, we are now real, we have now arrived, instead of selling to George, we want to sell to Baxter Medical.
That's a question that I think you'll find is not different here than it is everywhere, and that is something has a purity about it that should not be sullied by even accepting money if people want to give it to you. I am a radical free marketeer, and I believe that marketplaces are the best way to tell what has value and what doesn't. Because I think it's a test as an engineer. It's just like putting a meter on something, in my view. You can tell yourself what counts and pretty much make anything sound like it counts. But when other people tell you it counts, they can tell you a couple of ways. They can tell you with words, which are cheap, or they can write checks which say it really does count. And so I'm very much a believer that money doesn't sully anything. It ratifies it.
In my world, or Phil's world, economics and money and capitalism and entrepreneurship is how you sort out the winners from the losers. If you have a product and 100 people will give you $10 for it, and then 1,000 people will give you $10 for it, it must be of some value. Otherwise, why would they do it? If you have a product that's free and nothing comes of it, and you don't even know how many people are using it, what was it?
Once I started getting a publication called Board Watch by Jack Rickard, all of a sudden you have a monthly publication that literally lists thousands.
My brother called me and he said, "Hey, I found this magazine. They're totally advertising BBS software and everything." And I was like, "What?" And I couldn't believe there's a magazine about BBSs.
Board Watch magazine in the beginning, I just loved when it appeared. It was like a dream come true, and I read every issue from front to back.
I remember the first time one of my systems made Board Watch. That was an experience. It was almost like the old song about making the cover of the Rolling Stone. For a SysOp, being on the Board Watch top 100 list was big time. You made it.
Yeah, I think Board Watch magazine made me start to feel guilty about operating. It felt like I'm supposed to be making money out of this.
The character of Board Watch was the character, Jack. It was him through and through. He was evident all the way through the magazine. His choice of writers, his choice of style, the way it looked, was Jack.
He was such a elegant writer. He was so non-corporate in his ways.
He's one of those guys that got hate mail and the only thing that changed was the subject, pretty much from the start.
Being opinionated was almost a professional gig. If I didn't have an opinion about it, it didn't cause any reaction in me and probably wasn't important and no one would be interested in it. And if it did, I'd go ahead and put it in there. There was no pretense at editorial objectivity. It was, this guy's developed this and it's a stupid thing and it shouldn't be done and he won't last 6 months.
He usually had a smile on his face. That's what I'll say that about Rickard. He was a pretty happy guy.
He was a force on Galacticon that I sort of look like our other competitors. It wasn't always a friendly force. In fact, sometimes I'd say it was a downright hostile force, but it was a force that nonetheless made us stop and address issues and perspectives that we wouldn't have necessarily been paying attention to.
But he was one of those sort of voices out there that just did not support bullshit.
Other things being equal, it'd sure be good if Jack thought good things about us. To which, I think I spent many, many years off of my life, trying to have Jack think good things about Galacticon. In some cases, I was successful, and in some cases, I was not.
You get into these enormous flame wars, and Jack was famous for them. Oh my God, Jack was famous for them. Somebody would send him an email that he didn't like, and he would not only flame them, he would flame them in his column, which reprinted all of the emails that he got that he wanted to print. It was an enormously popular section of Board Watch magazine, but Jack just ran amok with a bloody sword at times. And he could do it, he could skewer people, and people loved to watch that. But it didn't add to our ability to get along together or work together or even to confront really important issues.
If I tell you that this wireless 802.11g item that I'm looking at right now will do a 54 megabit data rate. That's sort of a dry kernel of information. If I adopt a position on whether it should do it at all, it's a little bit easier to convey in a entertaining fashion, one that you'll remember. And if I describe to you the politics of how they came to that encoding scheme and who the guy is that did this and why he was almost knifed by his own employer because that wasn't really the politic thing to do at the time, what will cause you to read it is my opinion on it and a story about a person.
You know what was funny with the BBS world and this concept of competitors, I know we all got into it. Certainly Galacticom tried to compete very vigorously with eSoft and Mustang, but that was really a case where it was a rising tide lifting all boats. There were very few cases where I think we were taking customers away from each other.
When you're on the field, you actually are trying to kill the guy across from you. But at the same time, if he kills you instead, you admire him for having done it.
You know, like going out playing football, you know, where afterwards, you know, everyone can go get a beer.
And you both will go out afterwards and buy each other a drink and be great friends.
And it wasn't bitter. It wasn't like, you know, we really need to get those guys.
The whole BBS industry was large enough for all of us to profit, all of us to benefit from it. So it wasn't a real competitive industry. It wasn't a real cutthroat business, if you will. It still stayed friendly, even in the marketing of it and the sales.
It was kind of a friendly competition kind of thing. I mean, it was more like, it wasn't like stomp on the other guy. It was like one-up him so that he could one-up you, so that you could one-up him, and just kind of both of you are improving each other by way of competition.
We were just trying to show each other up on innovations, and I mean, wow, just what an incredible force that was. Yeah, I think competition did a lot of good for everyone who was in that commercial sector.
The BBS Con trade show was entirely Phil Becker's idea, actually.
As he says, I dragged him kicking and screaming into it, something he's been thankful for ever since. It's the way he'll phrase it, I suspect, when you talk to him.
He had to get me down on the floor and arm wrestle me to make it happen.
The evolution of BBSCon was, I wanted to do one from the time that I did my second TBBS, which was bringing just my own users of the software that I had created together. And I said to myself, this is something that everybody needs to be part of. This value is so high for this kind of interaction. But I didn't have a way to make it a successful business, something that I will never start down a road unless I see a path to.
But he was promoting the whole notion of these commercial conventions, that he was going to, he saw all these people that bought all this hardware, and he saw himself as having been able to found and find the next Comdex, and he was going to be the linchpin of that.
There were a number of uncomfortable elements about it. For me, I sat in a dark room in the Colorado mountains and wrote stuff and mailed it to people. This show required me to get up and speak in front of them. But Phil is the one that really got that off the ground. He actually would come over to my house, talk about it endlessly. I finally gave him a check, said, okay, here's my half, let's go do it.
And so we started out to do the first one in '92. And my goal from the very first was 1,000 people. I said, I want to make a statement that this is really an industry, and it really has a constituency, and it really has an audience, because it's the only way we're going to get commercial people to pay us sponsorship fees and do booths and make a convention that pays its way.
The biggest thing that was rewarding, our initial innovation was, as you say, the meetings that they had were in Howard Johnson's in Kansas, where it would be cheap.
I went to the first one. It was amazing. That's actually, here it is, 12 years later, And that convention was still the best convention that I've ever been to in my life. It was held in Colorado Springs.
It was very upscale, and it made the most expensive gathering that anybody, any bulletin board system operator had ever attended.
It was a 5-star convention center, and it was first class all the way. I remember we were outside, the weather was gorgeous, and we were outside, and here come these waiters with trays of cookies, just delivering them to all of the participants at this convention.
They just cranial detonations at what the room prices were, the registration, everything about it was just entirely too expensive, and no one would go. Except that actually a lot of people did come.
And one of the big features of BBS Con, BBS Cons to come, were the parties that various groups would have. The Galacticon party for all of our customers. I mean, we look forward to that more than like any other aspect of those conventions.
I went to a lot of seminars, and they had a big matrix of seminars. It was a couple days long, and I went to a couple seminars, and basically it was just people talking about how to grow your BBS and add new services, what attracts callers, and so forth. And it was a lot of fun, and it was also very informative.
The 6 months leading up to BBS Con was this incredibly intense time inside Galacticon, where like everyone in engineering and in marketing, I mean, we were all focused on how can we just blow everyone out of the water at this next show. And I mean, what a phenomenal force for like just encouraging innovation.
The first thing that impressed me is that there was a business there. A lot of people were selling equipment to other people who wanted to run bulletin board systems. And the second was the fact that there was a magazine that was devoted to bulletin board systems. And Jack clearly figured out the formula for taking advantage of that.
And the thing is, we brought Vint and Cerf to BBS Con not to talk about BBSs. I don't even know if he'd ever heard of one before he got there. We brought him there to have him tell the audience what was getting ready to happen to communications and computers. And our goal was every year we wanted somebody to come into one of those tabletop booths, and the next year see him with a company that was making him money and paying him a salary. And we did that repeatedly. Every year we saw that.
I would go to those conventions just to see what was going on out there. The first few conventions, I actually went with a booth. And, after I think the second or third one, we just said, what are we trying to do here? Kind of singing to the choir.
And it was sort of like, well, we know there's a market for all of this stuff, and God knows there are zillions of BBSers, but what will we do with this? And so they really didn't know.
We would see a lot of our old customers, but everybody knew about us, and so we weren't really gaining any new customers by having a booth there.
I was okay with, because it kind of harkened back to the early West Coast computer fairs. You've got all the innovators and that are out there, showing their new stuff. But past about that second year, it started to feel really commercial. We're not doing it for doing it anymore. We're doing it because we can make money at it. And that's where I started to kind of go,
Yeah, I think most of the smaller guys got short shrift. I think Searchlight to a large degree, and the Robo FX guy was there, and he had a very impressive display. I mean,
we'd go to these we'd go to the BBS cons. We'd spend a lot of money to get to BBS con. We'd set up this booth. We'd have truckloads of equipment that we'd bring in. It cost a lot of money. Took a lot of time. And who would walk up to my booth is not some guy with $10,000 to spend on a solution for his online services, but Joe BBS guy from New Jersey saying, you got something you can sell me for $35 that's going to let me talk to my friends online. It was a little disappointing.
Well, I just think there was a conflict of interest. I think, the people that are writing the articles are the same people that are best friends with or own part of the competition. So they're not going to give a fair share to each company. It was unethical.
Those things never really paid off for us. I know they must have paid off for somebody because they had them every year and people would go. So.
They obviously had something against us, so the fact that they did and they're in bed with Jack Rickard means that, they're not going to do anything to help promote our software. So, there was some conflict of interest there for sure.
At a certain point in there, we probably spent more time with each other than with anybody else, both of us. But the truth is, that wasn't going to make any difference. The only edge it gave me was I could get his attention to ask him to look at something. But once he looked, it's going to be his outlook it wasn't going to be mine. I wasn't going to be able to influence it.
If the fix was in, Phil Becker and TBBS, I can assure you, would have wound up owning all of bulletin boards and the internet. But they didn't.
If somebody beat me, he was going to say they beat me, and it wasn't a problem, and it was not going to be that way. Now, early on, I think that wasn't necessarily so well known, but Jack became very clearly known amongst this community quickly as somebody, nobody is going to tell Jack anything but what Jack wants to say is the only thing that's going to come out of his mouth.
They both wanted to make a buck at it. Jack with the magazine and Phil, of course, with his software company. And both did. Both were tremendously successful. And I don't know what their relationship was. I knew they were close friends at the time, and they seemed to be in cahoots with an awful lot of the stuff that both produced. And it was good. It was a good symbiosis. It worked.
There is nothing permanent in computers. Everything has a life cycle, and don't fall in love with any part of it so deeply that you can't make it a comfortable part of your past.
Once the internet, I'd say about the mid-95, early 96, is when I started to see a drop-off in callership.
Here's the deal. I kind of feel like I'm telling people to get ready for this thing that's coming. And I'm describing a tsunami. And since it's 4 inches tall out in the Pacific, they've come down with buckets. It's going to wipe out, the beach.
Instead of embracing the internet, I made the comment to my wife, oh, this is a new thing. It'll go away in a couple of years. It's like, okay, you live and learn.
Once it started to become ISP watch instead of board watch is when I was really turned off by it, because that shift started to happen before the BBS scene had died.
There was this huge division drawn by the participants between the internet and bulletin board systems. I was tone deaf to that. It looked like the same thing to me. Since, as I say, we covered the internet from 87 or 88, and bulletin boards from about the same time, I didn't realize how divided our audience was.
Not anything against board watch at all, but as they were making a business decision. But I was disappointed in how quickly the lack of PBS coverage, it just disappeared in like 96 and 97.
And I really think the people that I had in mind as our readership, it wasn't. So that division between the dial-up over the telephone lines and the internet was dialed up over the I still don't quite get the division.
Mustang was falling apart. One of the worst days of my life, and I'll never forget it, was walking into my QA lab, and my guys were already at work, and they read me the headlines of that day, which was, Quintus enters into agreement to purchase Mustang software. And from that day forward, I knew it was over. The Mustang that I grew up with, that I knew, was done.
I mean, the day came, I think it was like May 13th. It was a Monday, so you'd have to check your calendar, but it was towards the middle of May. And We got about 3 hours in, and he just came in and said, "You can keep working, but I can't pay you any further than this very moment." And he wrote a handwritten check for, like, I think it was the new pay period, 3 hours.
It was rather sad to see that. I knew Fred, I knew David Terry well. I consider David a friend. David had removed himself from day-to-day operations at CDC by that time, but just being connected, associated with it, you know. I didn't like to see how it went down. A lot of people lost orders, confidence in the industry, which of course by then was pretty much dying anyway. That's why it happened.
We all eventually got laid off. There's still a core group of Mustang people over the years to keep in touch, email, chats, the like. When Larry and I finally eventually got laid off from the company that eventually ended up buying the company that bought Mustang, we had a meeting where they basically told the engineering department that they were laying everybody off, and there was only a few people left, and they had another meeting saying, well, they're laying everybody else off. I didn't even get out of the meeting before and to my desk before I actually literally had voicemails, people calling on my cell phone, people leaving me instant messages going, "Is it true? Did you actually get laid off?" I mean, literally within seconds, people were, you know, from across the country, you know, friends from you know, in Georgia and Texas going, "Dude, I heard you got laid off."
And all of a sudden, it got to be Wall Street money guys that were on my phone mostly, not technical innovators and entrepreneurs. People were raising $100 million on a 16-page paper plan for something that was goofy. If it was done, it was a stupid idea and nobody needed it. At that point, you know, I'm kind of out of here. It's, you know, it's a different thing. The townies have moved in. We're not on the prairie here. There's no Dodge City, right? This is all townies. And so they don't need me, and I'll move along and go find something more interesting.
If Jim started a new company and asked you to go to it, would you go to it?
In a heartbeat.
No question. It's not even an option. Yeah.
You know, it's sort of funny is all the time that Galacticom was starting to grow as a company, we really had this deep-seated belief that this was the future, that in the next 10 years, and this was back in the early 90s, we were convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that within the next 10 years, this concept of people networked together through computers, I mean, that was going to be it. That was the way lives were going to evolve. And it was fascinating that we could be so right and so wrong at the same time.
It was great. You know, I look back at 6 years of challenge and fun, and all I can do is smile. You know, just a big roller coaster. So I enjoyed it quite a bit.
The way I look at it these days is, looking back on it, I like to tell people I made the world's best buggy whips.
We did real well. You know, it did. My house, Larry's house, a lot of people. We managed to, you know, sell some of the stock options we had, sell some of the, you know, stock that we bought, and, you know, got into homes. I certainly didn't think I'd be at the position like it, you know, right now. And that was because of BBSes. It really was.
I would hope the people who worked at Galacticom, the people who ran Galacticom systems, and even to a certain degree the people who were callers into these systems, that they would remember the positive things that brought into their life.
I mean, I remember the time that I got a call from a customer who called me up and just said, and I'm not going to use their name because when you hear the story you'll understand why, but called me up and said, Phil, I just have to thank you for what you've done. And of course, when a call starts that way, you never quite know what's going to happen. But I said, okay, and what was that? He said, well, when I came across your software, I had been spending a week with a pistol every day, trying to decide whether I should make it to tomorrow or end it. And I saw your software, and it opened up a world to me, being online and being on this BBS. And he says, and I've never looked back and never had those thoughts again.
Well, it was my life. I actually ate my family and everything else. I worked typically 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for many years, without a day off. I lived it, breathed it, ate it, and loved it. And loved every minute of it.
FidoNet is a strange beast.
One day you called me up and said, David, I found this really neat thing. You have to check it out.
Yeah.
You just threw our BBS away and brought up FidoNet.
That was a remarkable revolution in BBSes with the Fido boards. They were great. Because I mean, you get a message somewhere without having to make a long distance call yourself.
The feeling was just indescribable. The feeling was actually greater than the feeling that I had when I actually first started the bulletin board. You know, I mean, it was like a feeling of, okay, I really am a SysOp. I've been accepted by my fellow SysOps.
We would literally sleep on the floor in that room waiting for the phone to ring, knowing that we were getting our nightly load of FidoNet info. And it was like, you know, you were always the first person up there to wait, and you watch the progress meter. It goes, okay, we're done. Let's see who replied to my message, you know.
FidoNet was really our first ability to sort of be in the broader community like the internet feels today.
FidoNet didn't invent something that didn't exist before, but it provided it to a whole new group of people.
Yeah, this is just amazing that we can get mail messages around the world and nobody has to pay anything on all these phone calls.
Fido was really what brought bulletin boards into the modern era. And so be sure and cover that well.
I had no idea it was going to become so amazingly large or long-lived. That's the part that gets me. Phoenix Software was, I believe, if I remember correctly, the sole subcontractor with Microsoft to install MS-DOS on various manufacturers' hardware. I would sometimes just get a board nailed to a piece of plywood with a power supply that gives you shocks, no monitor, and CPU and memory, and an EEPROM socket, and a list of I/O ports. And I would burn a PROM on my 8086 machine, and I would stick the PROM in, and I would make the screen clear. You know, then I would go step by step by step and make a machine come up cold. So I had this real concept of hardware-independent device layer. I thought, well, you know, I want to write a bulletin board. I get a spare few weeks. That can be easy. Well, you know, 10 years later, it was still not done. But wrote this bulletin board, and it used the I/O layer I'd done for Phoenix.
Ultimately, that's how I found
Tom Jennings was because I had this deck rainbow that needed communication software for and didn't have any.
John Medill, I don't know how, he ended up calling my bulletin board, said, hey, I got a deck rainbow. I also don't have an IBM PC.
And for the first maybe year or so, all I knew was there was this incredibly bright mind on the other end of a keyboard that was typing words to me faster than I could read.
It was very painful. He would tell me some data, I would make a binary, he would download it at 1200 baud across the country, you know, during the day, and we did this a dozen or 20 times, and finally the freaking thing worked.
It was really, it was fun. I mean, I remember a lot of anticipation about that first version, but I don't recall it not working, you know? Maybe that's just selective memory, but it just like always worked. And that's one of the things that was amazing about Tom. He cut a lot of code, and it worked.
So there was a bunch of Fido bulletin boards, and then John and I were just doing so much keyboard chat, you know, SysOpt chat crap. It was making me crazy, and it was costing a fortune. So I don't know where I remembered that bulletin board to bulletin board message thing.
Tom and I used to talk on the phone frequently. He said I was talking to John Medill and got to thinking about it. He said, wouldn't it be neat if our boards could call each other up, exchange messages, or maybe exchange files?
There was other talk about this stuff at the time, and I don't recall it. But they were all very complicated schemes. Oh, we must get around this local call business. And I said that, well, what does it cost? Just what does it cost? Just did the math. It just wasn't a whole lot of money. Basically, in 1 minute, you could move a couple of K of text or something. So the economics just went that bad. So did the first FidoNet.
We went through this transition where we went from being Fido BBS to being FidoNet.
Tom Jennings had logged in during the middle of the night somewhere along the way, and he'd uploaded a new Fido, another program called FidoNet, and a node list.
You're actually launching 2 machines coast to coast connect, and error checking and resynchronization, all this stuff. And it's like, this is going to be a big machine. It was fun making a big autonomous machine.
And suddenly we had systems that could call each other up and talk to one another.
How it got spread out after that, because it was just amazing. We went from 2 to I don't know, it seems like 150 in less than 6 months or some such thing. And it just had a momentum of its own and mind of its own and just spread like wildfire.
When Jennings was running it, somebody'd call him up with a change, and he'd write it down on a post-up, and he'd stick it up on the wall. And maybe he'd see it in a week or so and finally get it edited into the node list, and maybe it'd fall off the wall and he'd never see it at all. And his wall was a mass of post-its. How he ever found anything in what was on the wall, I don't know. He published the node list whenever he felt like it. So there was no way that you knew that a new node list was available. So Ken and I got together over the phone and I said, we've got to do something about this. So I made a conference call with Ken and TJ. Our position was, you've got to give up this chore and let somebody else do it. So he says, okay, you do it. The node list continued to grow, and by late winter, early spring of '85 now. We've been in business as a network almost a year. And that's when TJ laid the awful truth on us. He had 250 node limit. Well, we were about 230 nodes at that time. And so we started getting panicky. That's when we started talking about what are we going to do. We're running out of node list space. The node list is becoming unmanageable. It's so big anyway. I took off work, Ken took off work, Tony Clark took off work, and TJ, we all came here, and this is the meeting you're talking about. TJ had some maps in his knapsack, and he pulled out a map of the U.S. All it had was the outlines of the states. And Tony Clark and I got down there with felt tip markers and started carving out regions.
You're into trivia here. Do you know why how the first FidoNet regions in the U.S. were created? It was based on the NCAA basketball brackets.
It was totally arbitrary, really. What we were trying to do was come up with more or less equal populations as best we could guess. We were all prepared for a horrendous horror story when we switched from the amorphous net to the net node concept, because we all did it on the same day.
That sticks in my mind more than anything else when, they had us go from just nodes to net node, and how, they were all so worried about, we're going to do this at like midnight and everything's going to either work or it's all going to blow up, and everybody had to be ready to do the same thing at the same time, and, the good old days.
I figured, oh, it's going to be a catastrophe.
I was the 17th node on the FidoNet, and then they went to regions and nodes, and so then 107 was the New York area, and everybody had to split off, and since I went down to New Jersey, they had changed my number, and I got upset with that because now it's 10727. I went, no one's going to know I was an early starter in this, and here was my point of pride, that I was one of the early settlers on the homestead.
So yeah, it was a giant ongoing software project. It was kind of open-ended. It's kind of fun up until like 92. Almost 10 years.
It was amazing, some of the stories that I was told.
During Desert Shield, and they're doing the build-up in Saudi Arabia. At that point, this is pre-internet. There was a Desert Storm Fido BBS over there. There was we were doing electronic mail to soldiers stationed in Saudi Arabia. And at the time, this was pretty groundbreaking.
The lure of having stuff sent to me and available for me to read when I wake up in the morning from God knows where on the planet. And yeah, it's the planet because there was stuff popping in from other places. It wasn't just local stuff.
It worked well. I could send, email messages across the country long before anybody heard about the internet. Long before people, what email, what's that?
Basically for free, I could send a message from here to New Zealand, Australia, New York City, wherever.
I remember this one guy, I don't remember where he was, I just knew he wasn't on our continent. I would send a message out to him and it would take 2 days for the packets to get to his BBS. Then he would reply and it would take another 2 days for the packets to make its way back to me.
That was a fascinating thing.
You're projecting your presence vicariously out and you have no idea how far it goes.
When you get to the messaging alone, there's that to field in the subject area. That's the news groups. This is a news group that has a to field in it. And that, for people, has a bizarre effect on people to look at. First off, they look at it and they think it's not to me, I'm not supposed to be reading this. Okay? But they get explained to them that this is a message that's public. If they wanted it private, they had the option to. So they wanted you to see this. And they thought, well, he did that on purpose then, huh? Okay. And now they want to read because they know that people see it. And that little subtlety in there is just tremendous.
You could do your own filtering. You could decide which echoes you wanted to view, to participate in. You can lurk in any one you want, not say anything, and then come into any one you want, and then project yourself.
One Tuesday a month, second or third Tuesday of the month, we'd meet and get together. It was great because then you could meet with all these people, and everybody was a fabulous mind. You've interviewed a lot of these people. There's no idiots out there, except for maybe one or two users.
I think when I used to travel a little bit, and when I traveled, I usually took my node list with me because it was like the greatest BBS list. You could use that, and then find local ones.
We met people all over the world. We had people come visit us from Australia, and they took a trip to the U.S., and what they did was they pretty much traveled around and stayed with other SysOps.
There were organizations that used Fido as a means for communicating within different locations in a company. And it was a real cool tool for businesses to use at that time.
If it was if it was a relatively small club of 100 people or 1,000 people that went on for 10 or 15 years, it'd be one thing. But it's like this huge, nebulous, swirling mass of chaos. And when people send me email, it's like from some area I never heard of. Like if there was about a year and a half when I was getting email from .ru domains about FidoNet stuff in Russian to English dictionary language. And Russian is just a complicated language. It doesn't translate well. So it's like, I didn't even know what they were talking about. But it was flattering. It was, it was generally good. They were asking questions, and if I could answer, I'd answer. So just these, so clearly FidoNet was having a little mini something or other in .ru land. And I don't know what it's about.
Just a few months ago, I heard from a doctor in Vietnam. And he said, all the fancy stuff of the internet and all of the rich collection of information on the internet, but that's censored in Vietnam by the government. But phones are not. And he said, do you know I get HIV information that is the latest and the best HIV information anywhere on the planet? He said, and I get that through BBSing because they don't censor the telephone. So they can shut the internet down, but there's still a way in. And he said, thanks. You know, without FidoNet and Opus, a lot of people would be dying that aren't dying. So that's cool.
You came and went.
Tom is a fictional character that I've read about on the internet and in the Fido News.
The deification of Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say...
Well, sure, everybody thought Tom was the god of
Tom
telecom.
Yeah.
It's really kind of interesting, but we're definitely in a situation where Tom was the creator. And you can look at that from a religious or a spiritual perspective, or you can just look at it as he was being creative, and he created this thing that had a life of its own.
You bet. And when you got to meet him, I mean, you know, he was so aloof, just because he's a character. I mean, you figure that out after years, you know.
Tom was this incredibly admired individual that put a lot of time into doing something that he believed in. Now, maybe it was just for the excitement. Maybe it turned into something. Maybe what everybody thought it was for Tom was nowhere near what it was for him. And I imagine that that's probably the case.
I guess everybody really has their own view of the, quote, Tom Jennings dream.
He did a lot to promote that messianic image. Now, you're talking to him, and this is 20 years later, okay? And we've all hopefully grown up a little bit or changed in a number of ways, but there was no stronger supporter of the messianic image of TJ than TJ.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely chaos.
You know, it was like, yeah, I'm saying this. Let's hear the applause from the wings. That's what I'm saying. You know, and Laura loved him. He deserves kudos for what he did. There's no question about it.
His idea was we were in FidoNet to communicate. I don't think Tom wanted to be the emperor of anything, and I think he'd probably be amused by the idea of people coming to him saying, "Oh, Holy Father, we want you to rule on something for us."
Everybody's going to have their view of what Tom Jennings' dream for FidoNet was. I think really his dream was, in a nutshell, communication. Getting people to communicate. And I think if you really want to boil it down a little farther than that, I'm not really sure that he had a dream. I think he just had an idea that this would be fun to write this software.
It just gets used to justify any old thing, which is kind of flattering that I have this apparent power. In fact, you know, send me checks. Everyone send me checks. So there was this net node thing. The region, the linguistic error I made was calling it a region, with the idea that nets are encompassed in the region. Rather than just being a logical entity, they were taken to be political boundaries. And this gave them this de facto position to assume geopolitical power over sections of the FidoNet. And that started in '84 and was, as far as I'm concerned, the goddamn fucking ruination of FidoNet. The political conniving over region stuff. And the little petty thief stuff. Oh, petty dim-witted bulbs. I still get mail from them once in a while.
The technology is easy. It's the politics that's hard.
There was this whole political side that just, whoa, yeah.
I have approached people in the past, hey, how about FidoNet? And they're like, ooh, too much politics, too much fighting.
It's the same crap that's been happening ever since Tom created basically the second node out there. I mean, the politics have been going on since day one. And it's just people that are trying to do their own power plays. It's sad that they're taking a really nice technology and distorting it to their own means.
FidoNet was a good thing. I really enjoyed being associated with FidoNet. The politics killed it.
Instead of getting something accomplished and done, when you put something on the floor, everybody else wants to be part of it, and the only way they feel they could be part of it is by trying to make that thing better. And then you get involved in a bitching competition about how it should be done right. Nothing ever gets done at all, and all that's left at the end of it is just a whole bunch of bitterness.
When you have a small group of people, everyone knows, you know, and we might have foibles and differences, but I can see you're working on this, and so things sort of work out. But when you get to the point where you have people who don't know each other, then you get to the point where people perceive that there's an inside and an outside, and they're not inside. And things are being done to them from the inside, and then people scream and yell.
Whereas if you would have said, we're doing it this way, this is how we're going to do it, you people make it work, would have been much better. But no, they could never get themselves to commit to paper on something.
All the nights you sat there after sending flame mail to somebody, you know, oh, I don't want to coordinate with you anymore, you suck, bing. And you'd watch as and you would do a forced drop, right? You would force the upload to the node immediately, and then you'd sit there and you'd wait and you'd pull the node, and then bing, it would come back and, oh, well, you're an idiot and you have snakes in your bathroom, and you'd sit there and it was so funny to watch. I mean, now you look at it and it's ridiculous.
But in a region, you would have little hot spots like this, and every now and then, like the Pittsburgh SysOps would all be screaming, yelling mad at their NC, and like, I have no idea why. What's the big deal? Does the mail get through or not? It either does or it doesn't. Who cares?
Then it just sort of started to become so much flamage. It was like you never were doing anything right. But eventually it became almost a battleground where, well, you can't get it right, but I know I can, and then sort of everyone wanted it. Then it got into, well, we run the right BBS and they run the wrong BBS, so we need you to kick them out.
Private individuals, most of whom had real jobs for real companies and did this in their spare time at their own expense, you know, with their own money, and didn't have time to mess around with all this political stuff. You know, because I want to be able to turn my computer on, and I want my email to go, and I want my news groups, I want my Echo Mail, and that's what I want. And I don't want to deal with the rest of this stuff. You know, the day my computer stops working, and then maybe I'll get involved.
We're not going to agree. We don't need to agree. The protocols have to run. That's all. We're never going to agree. We shouldn't have to agree. Technically, the stuff works, and if you want to spin off your own network, that's just fine.
But the rest of it, you know, he doesn't give a flying fuck about the politics of FidoNet any longer.
I bet he's disappointed in how things turned out.
You think so? I mean,
If he were not disappointed, I think he would still participate.
It just has to follow these minimal standards. The rest of it, I couldn't give a shit. Who, how, what bad thing they did, whether they're Nazis, Mother Teresa, you know, I just don't care. And it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. The whole IFNA debacle, it's a very sore point amongst a number of people.
IFNA was originally TJ's idea. In fact, he coined the phrase.
He came up with it. He came up with it. I tell people that.
It was our own doing. I was fully responsible, along with Ken Kaplan and all that, in hindsight, of doing this IFNA debacle, which I'm sure you will hear to no end.
Back in '84, he was talking about an international FidoNet association, and he wanted it so that he could distribute T-shirts and bumper stickers,
Right.
and that's about all he could think of
Right.
to use it for.
We said we need to be represented. We need to have a little technical appearance in the technical world, and as a group buyer of, you know, who the hell knows what, you know, IBM PC insurance, you know, whatever the hell the idea is at the time, we'll have this international FidoNet association.
We felt that we needed some voice out there. We needed some sort of lobbying voice, or at least some voice that we can bring to government and say, we're out there, this is how it works. You don't need to necessarily recreate laws for this sort of stuff.
Why do we need an IFNA? The answer was so Ken and Ben could legally accept money to help support their efforts with Fido.
Ken's phone bill at that time was monstrous because he was pushing the node list out.
Ken filled out his taxes, and his accountant told him he was going to owe taxes on all the money he had collected in '85.
He was screwed twice because his accountant told him that donations would count as income, but the expenses wouldn't count as expenses.
It wasn't a huge amount, but it was a non-trivial amount, I'll tell you.
And it was insult to injury.
And
Why to report it as income?
Exactly.
So that was one thing that suddenly, and he's already collected he'd already collected by April as much in '86 as he had in all of '85.
It was basically structured so that money could be given in, so that the people who were putting out lots of money for their hobby wouldn't have to put it out. It would be taken care of so that those central nodes, the modems would be given to them.
But we needed an organizational framework in which to do that, and conventionally that's a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, so that's what we did.
That was the beauty of it. Like, wow, we don't have to charge you for this. It's not even like an ISP to get on. We don't have to charge you. It's like, but we have to have this rule book because otherwise they won't give us this classification. Then corporations will just give us stuff.
I spent all the money that came into IFNA. I was, one individual. I had one P.O. box. I was spending it on postage. I was spending it on, some of it
phone calls
on corporation. I was doing absolutely nothing except for going out of my way to try to cross my T's, dot my I's, and do everything to properly set this organization up.
It was something we all agreed on, and unfortunately it got bastardized very quickly after it got taken over, because everybody feared that this was going to be some organization that was just going to destroy FidoNet.
I got just absolutely, this guy is stealing money. He is, gonna send everybody down the tube, and he's taking FidoNet with him.
I think they saw Ken Kaplan, and these guys saying, he's a good guy, he can be in. He's a bad guy, I don't want him in.
It's horrible, it's miserable, we don't want it, we hate it.
We wanted to steal FidoNet.
Yeah.
We had created FidoNet.
We presented this idea of the IFNA, voluntary association, but we blurred some lines. We really fucked up. It would also manage the node list. People saw in this, probably rightly so, the seeds or the roots for future, quote, takeover of FidoNet. So there'd be this, nice and all well-meaning IFNA that controls the node list. And then if they decide to charge money later, you've basically commercialized FidoNet. That wasn't the goal at all. That really wasn't the goal.
Everybody had been able to think about it because I guess they'd announced before this meeting that this was going to be the big organizational meeting of the IFNA, and they'd left people alone way too long to think about what that might mean. And they had already decided not only how horrible it was, but specifically which evil, foul, universal crime against humanity it was going to commit. And when they stood up there, I don't think anybody was more stunned than they were.
What happened was it blew up in front of us. We were like shocked. People are screaming, we're being railroaded, blah, blah, blah.
And then, once that polarization hit, which was within 30 seconds of the first meeting to discuss whether we should do this and whether this was the way to do it, it was spiraling out of control from then on.
It was a whole horrible mess. We didn't understand what was going on.
There was just no good way to please the masses.
So IFNA was a nice idea, ill-conceived. I think on our side, people might have been less altruistic than others. So IFNA once formed, chugged along under its own inertia. By 86, I think in 86 I did the big embarrassing debacle on the podium. Was very stressful and a painful day.
Yeah, he was not a happy man that weekend.
But we said, you people are fucked. This IFNA stuff. This was the classic animal, George Orwell's Animal Farm. It's like the third or fourth FidoNet conference. And everyone was just a bunch of dorky SysOps, right? All a bunch of flabby white guys and 5% women. And we're in some banquet room for this conference, which was very heated. There's all this stuff. There's this evil lawyer involved.
The guy who was running the conference was a lawyer from Denver. And he kept making speeches. And every time he opened his mouth, he made things worse.
Basically, so that we went to this banquet room. Everyone's like, well, this IFNA thing is getting to be really bad. We walk in. There's all these tables, standard hotel banquet stuff, and then there's a little raised platform with a long table and chairs on it for the IFNA board.
As for the raised dais, nobody did that deliberately. It's just the way the hotel set things up.
So all of a sudden, it was genuinely us and them. And it's like, okay, you said you weren't going to do this, and you did it. They did it. And I was on the board. They wanted me to go, and I simply refused. I said some horribly disparaging thing about it, and other people were up in arms. And then poor Ken Kaplan, because his heart was always in the right place in this stuff, always. Poor Ken Kaplan said, okay, that's all, and it just collapsed into chaos. This lawyer, he wanted to just simply fully commercialize FidoNet, period. Pay to play. He wanted to charge people to be in the node list. He took me aside just before this meeting and said, we're going to go into this and we're going to have some vote. I forget what the issue was. We're going to have some vote on whether you have to pay or something, whether you have to be a member of IFNA to be in the node list, the pivotal point. And this is up in his hotel room. He said, we're going to vote for it. It's a done deal. If you go along with it, being me, it'll all happen smoothly. If you go, well, it's going to happen anyways. It'll just be a lot of trouble. And I should have said, fuck you. I didn't say fuck you, but I virtually said fuck you. I said, I'm not going along with this. And then I went downstairs and didn't go along with it. And then that's when legal action started. It was fairly easy for a small number of people to wreak a large amount of havoc. And it's easy also to lose perspective on that and realize that on a large scale, the network crawled on. It breaks up into little pieces and it reforms, and it doesn't really matter. Because underneath there's people who are using the network technology to do something between us, and there's this raging lunacy over here, and they just don't have to look and pay attention to it at all. So that was its saving grace. It just runs in spite of the idiots.
Yeah, well, I know when Ken, and I call it a disappearing act, even though it really wasn't that, but when he just, pretty much had it, I always wondered if he was bitter at the end. I mean, he got screwed. But then again, they all did.
That's the reason I burned out so early is I am not and never really was a bulletin board sysop. What I was into was the technology, the creation of technology, the advancement of technology. That's where I got off. And when that started to wear out or slip away or whatever it did, I began to burn out.
what I found is that I was competing for Tom's time when I talked to him about concepts and what have you. And at one point, I just realized that I had to let it go, because fighting for space in this wasn't what I had in mind. You know, my involvement was pure curiosity and pure adrenaline and pure excitement. So when it stopped being those things, I fell out of that.
Those jobs are thankless jobs. And yeah, you know, a lot of times you don't get the praise until you leave.
It's so nutty, and you sit there and you're getting cursed at, and I'm not an evil guy. I know I'm not. What the hell? And they eat you up. It's like you're sitting there, and all of a sudden I realize, my wife divorces me because I'm always on the computer, but I'm on for these stupid conference things, trying to straighten, and explain myself over and over again. And you go, what am I doing this for? This was supposed to be a nice hobby.
And whenever you throw up your hands and say, "Oh man, I quit. I'm so tired of this." Blah. Well, you can't leave. You're the greatest we've ever had. Really? Why didn't you tell me that? Back then. Why do you wait until now?
When we let FidoNet go, we made sure that whoever we handed it off to was someone who was going to keep it going. So I know. When I walked away from it, I knew that, maybe these guys weren't going to keep it flying for as long as I did. But it kept going.
That amazes me more when I found out just recently that FidoNet is alive and well. And
I think as FidoNet is in 2002, we obviously probably have a more mature user base and mature, at least in years at the very least, membership. The folks that are involved with it now, yes, there can be some parallels that some folks might draw to ham radio or other hobbies that have been around for a while.
We are a dwindling breed, but we're stubborn. I look on that as a badge of perseverance, and I still find value in it.
Do you think there'll be a FidoNet in 10 years?
Absolutely. What it looks like, I don't know, and I'm not even going to try and predict. It'll be smaller, I would bet, but yeah, there'll be a FidoNet in 10 years.
My thanks to Tom Jennings for writing FidoNet. That was brilliant software. The concepts that he worked into that were just great. Wonderful stuff.
It taught me that you can't have... I was an anarchist and anti-war and everything, and after that, I understood benevolent dictatorships.
It was the great irony of FidoNet was that Tom Jennings was an anarchist and believed in everybody should just do their own thing, but he designed this networking technology that required a central authority to say who was in and who was out.
People say, "Oh, FidoNet peaked whenever it had 30,000 nodes, and growing. And then it started dying off." Well, yeah, that's true. You can't argue with history. The history book is written. You can go back through the node list and see this. But on the same token, I don't see that FidoNet has totally peaked. FidoNet started out as a couple of computers with software that really didn't exist, that was being invented. The software has evolved constantly. So I don't know that really FidoNet has peaked yet.
It's nice to build something that lasts longer than you do. Well, I don't know if it will, but it lasts longer than your current attention span. It's like, oh, that's still going on? Oh, I didn't know. It's like, oh, I left the stove on, the water's still boiling.
in my personal life, Harley represents total freedom to me. Okay, I mean, fuck the laws, fuck the rules. You know, I have as much freedom as I'm willing to risk. Well, the computer and my hacker life represents that type of freedom, the same type of freedom exactly, but, you know, on a computer. It's just, you know, whether people are called bikers or whether they're called hackers, it's the same type of freedom we're talking about.
Hacking is simply hacking away at a computer keyboard until it does what you want it to do. That's all, nothing more or less. You can hack out a letter to Aunt Millie. It's just hacking away to do what you want it to do. The press has usurped our rightful title and handed it off to these 14-year-old twerps who crack into computer systems, and that bothers me.
A hacker is somebody who comes up with this really elegant line of code that fixes your problem.
You know, hackers are a natural resource. Come from Ohio. You know, Orville and Wilbur Wright, the original hackers, you know, bicycle guys.
And he just does it like that off the top of his head, basically.
You never went in there trying to harm somebody else's system. It was all about the wall and getting through the wall and figuring out creative ways under, around, through, whatever.
So that the spirit to be able to take these components, put technology that was the domain of governments for so long, and to let the average person figure out how to use it, I mean, that's the promise of technology.
BBSes were just the way to meet other hackers. That was the main point.
And then you kind of run into that when you're doing the BBS thing. There's like strata. There's like all this happy FidoNet, and then there's the other thing. And so you kind of weasel around. You find interesting stuff.
And I'm meeting people who are saying, oh, you want to learn about this? Here's some information. Here's a manual. Go to the telco, ask them this question. They'll tell you. They'll answer your question. They'll give you information.
It was just so exciting that there's this, yeah, that's funny. There's like this underground of stuff going on and people hacking stuff and messing with things that the other mags weren't talking about. Because yeah, it was really exciting to see that, and the gears started turning, you know.
A way to meet other people so you could learn about the system you're trying to hack, you know, and download text files, download FRAC, read about the system you know you found scanning.
And that feeds the whole information drive. You start craving it. It's like a drug.
I pretty much stopped calling anything that didn't have to do with the computer underground in one sense or another. Didn't have time for it, wasn't interested in it. Just stopped dealing with it at all.
You basically knew by connecting to the board before anything happened, just how you're logging into the board, what they have to offer. You know, you can tell just by what BBS software they're running.
Certainly there was an aspect of the well, we're a bunch of pirates and they're a bunch of straights and la la la, but it was just more like, God, these people are boring.
You know, you'd have to fill out a little essay about yourself and answer a bunch of questions. And what got me is that I could have got a credit card with less information than these BBSs would want just to give me, you know, download access.
You had to fill out a form, and you had to, like, you know, you'd have to send it back to SysOpt, and you have to give them his email, and people would get scared about giving the SysOpt the email.
I believe the popular phrasing was, "Are you a cop?"
Because they weren't sure if the SysOpt was a Fed or not. And then it would, you know, they would get the email. Then they would have to do a callback verification to make sure your number
is in place. So I'm serious, dude. This is how it worked. It was a painful process.
I mean, there's tons of people all the time, you know, you'd see trying to apply to bulletin boards when you go through the new user voting process that would somehow just stumble across an elite BBS phone number, and everybody would, you know, that was the greatest for laughs because you get to vote on them and put comments and be like, how the hell did this guy find this bulletin board phone number, you know?
I thought I was the shit and then find out, no, I was nothing.
I mean, they would ask everything. They'd ask if you knew what all these abbreviations stood for, and you know, how long have you been part? What's your newest game? That was always my big one for getting into other bulletin boards. There was always a question that said, "What's your newest piece of pirated software?" So I would always just make up the name of a game. I'd be like, Bernie Johnson's Truck Rally 5. And then people would always be like, damn, like, wow, that's really just so new. I've never even heard of it.
A lot of pirate boards were designed to look like some obscure system, like an old Unix system or whatever. And then once you log in, you know, you get the pirate board. Sometimes there's special passwords to get in.
We had a public arena, and most people thought that's all we had. And then there were back rooms and back levels and sub levels and so on.
So I had, if you first logged on, you were a peasant. And maybe if you got a little more access, I can't recall, you were given a classic card or a silver card or a platinum card, different ways to go up the social scale. And when you did, you got access to more games or better discussion boards, places where people wouldn't be necessarily tolerant of people coming in there and flame baiting people and yelling at people or being very mature. Or even higher than that would be the more nefarious areas, pirating, hacking, phreaking.
You know, we wouldn't just say, take anyone's word for it. I know you have elite. I don't know what you're talking about, you know.
As a SysOp, I get email all the time. You know, people want access to my elite section, elite this, elite that. And I never had one. I was actually always very paranoid about having one. Especially once I was like past 17, when I was 18 years old, I'm like, all right, now I'm really like, this is major reason not to have one.
I think the best application forms written were by the humble guys. Do you have a girlfriend, and is she gonna get in the way? You know?
The whole elite thing wasn't a conscious thing or a stated thing. And oftentimes I would downplay it or not discuss it, crossing from one network to the other, because people get weird about it.
Right.
Or I'm going to spend all my time helping this person find a way into that network. And a lot of times it just didn't work out. So I don't think I ever actually, you know, I can get in.
Well, handles gives you a sense of anonymity, and besides, every third user is named Bob. And you can't have more than one Bob. You can have Bob 2, Bob 3, or Curly Bob, or Bob's your uncle, or, you know, a cool name.
Handles. Like, I remember having to consciously alter my mind when talking to my normal friends, like, about what a handle was and everything else.
You know, the first time I logged on a bulletin board, I was naive and I used my real name, you know? Yeah. And then the second time, once you see that people have a name, you pick something out. Right. And he came up with Sid Vicious.
Which was extremely creative, as you
Right.
Mm-hmm.
can imagine. Yeah.
And that, mind you, I didn't know who Sid Vicious was when he came up with the Sid Vicious
I
name.
probably didn't know who Sid Vicious was when I came up with it.
And then saw it in the news or something. And then I came up with graphic violence again because I figured there was a move on that there's too much graphic violence on television. So I said, oh, okay, we'll have graphic violence then.
Because it gave you a sense of being something cooler and much more independent than you normally would ever be for, you know, a 10 or 12-year-old boy growing up in suburbia.
I went by the alias The Almighty Set. Named after an Egyptian god.
I was always Pud. I was Pud, Desperado, and Cannibal. I sort of flipped between the three. I was actually Pud when I was being a SysOp, but I was Cannibal and Desperado a lot of times when I was on other bulletin boards because I wanted to anonymously see what people were saying about me and my board without them knowing that I was there.
For me, I remember when I started using the handle count 0, and this was before there were a billion people using the handle count 0. I was the only person that I knew of who was using it. And this was right as soon as the book came out, before it was a paperback. I mean, it was.
And so being a 13 or 15-year-old kid, or whatever I was at that time, I looked up at my wall and I saw a poster of Star Trek, or actually I think it was a printout of ASCII art of the Klingon Warbird and the Enterprise, and I just said James T. Kirk.
And then whenever you would log onto a board, it would ask you for your handle and then your real name. I always would use, in the book Count Zero, the character Count Zero's real name is Bobby Newmark, so I'd always register as Bobby Newmark too. So
I thought once I've established my name, I couldn't change it. I didn't know. I had no idea.
I mean, the easiest way to stamp yourself as a newbie back then was to have one of about 5 or 10 different things in your name, right? Lord or God or the Great, or Ninja or, I mean.
Occasionally you'd get into these little wars where, somebody would steal your name across the country and you're like, well, we had it first and we have the files to prove it, And so usually they'd say, all right, fine, we'll just pick a different name. It was something we picked in the garage today, whatever.
I remember getting a phone call one time because the first time I started calling out, I had no idea what to call myself. It was just like, I'm going to call out. And I ended up using a handle Sniper. Don't ask me why. I can't explain it. It just came up, a Sniper. And I remember getting a phone call from someone on like a 3-way phone call. And maybe a month down the road, I haven't been doing it very long. You got to change your handle, man. I've had that for a long time. And people are starting to confuse us. And this whole little people trying to bully me to change my handle and all this stuff. And the funniest thing was I remember thinking about it and going, screw you guys, I'm not fucking changing my handle for you. I could care less, And eventually I thought it was lame anyways and changed my handle to Zealot.
Initially it was sort of a fun thing, but having a handle, but I really took it to heart. And as over time, I had so many conversations using my handle as my name. And I felt the same way with all these other people I was talking to daily, Brian Oblivion, Omega, White Knight, Golgo 13, Magic Man, Darby Crash. They really became like real names to me. And when I learned their, quote, real names, I didn't feel like I had to switch to one or the other. I would use them both sort of interchangeably. And so, and it's funny now to this day, like whenever I hear anybody say, just like the number 0. Someone says 0. I'm like, what? Did someone say my name?
I think a lot of people are not happy with who they are, or they may think that their lives are really not very interesting, which for most of us that's not true. We all lead rather interesting lives. And if somebody wants to use a handle, more power to them.
During the process of hacking, we should never destroy anything. Explore to learn all the kinkiest technology, modify stuff and make your own. Learn how to do everything, especially the dark side stuff. Learn that first, okay? But don't implement it. It's like, yes, you could have a rifle here and you could be the best marksman in the world, but it doesn't mean that you have to shoot somebody.
Phreaking means a lot of different things. Phreaking basically covers the whole spectrum of fun with Ma Bell, fun with the phone company, different things you can do. And people will say that a lot of different things fall into the phreaking category, which could be everything from, something as stupid as stealing somebody's calling card number to something like, getting change out of a payphone. I mean, there's a lot of different categories.
Long distance calling back then was expensive. People today don't have any feeling for how expensive it actually was to pick up the phone, especially when you're trying to transfer 16K of data at 300 baud. It was a sizable chunk of change each month.
And I was calling all over the country making long distance calls. The phone bill that showed up one month was about that thick, and my mother just about had a heart attack. I had to go get a summer job to pay the phone bill off.
My parents flipped out. They were basically They're like, what the hell are you doing up there? But
do you remember how much that bill was for?
$350. The next one was $500. And at that point, my parents were like, "You've got to get these bills down." Well, so that's where the Phreaking came in.
There's no way you're gonna pay for that because you couldn't afford it. And if you're doing it legit on your parents' line, I mean, they're gonna kill you next month.
So I think a lot of the things as far as people phone phreaking, at least that were in the computer scene, was really to get access to BBS content, and it was typically long distance.
What am I going to do? Well, I can't stop calling these places. I just have to figure out how to do it for free.
All right, so you'd get the 1-800 numbers and the access codes.
So you get you a phone scanner, you'd run it all day while you're at school or something.
And the whole point of the program was it had to try every code, then get a code, dial the Sprint number, wait whatever seconds, input the stolen Sprint code, and then dial CompuServe. If it got a carrier, boom, that went on your printer the next morning. So you go to sleep, the next morning you wake up, you had 2 or 3 Sprint codes.
You come home, you'd have a couple codes, whatever. You have to do that every month. You have to have fresh codes, very important.
And you had a choice. Either you kept it to yourself, which was the best thing to do because you might have gotten 30 days of good long distance dialing out of it, or you traded it on a message on a bulletin board to get high-end access to their pirate games. And that code usually within 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, would be dead because by the time you gave it out, 10 people gave it out to 10 more people, gave it out to 100 more people. Before you know it, it was across the entire United States, out into Europe, out into everywhere, out to every single BBS out there. And of course, that set off the red flag with Sprint or MCI or whoever it was.
I used to stand at payphones in my high school and punch up numbers all day until I got a code. I got that tone, and hey, I could call New York City.
And the motivation of the kids isn't ever to screw the company. It's more, well, I need this. I need this, and what am I going to do? What am I, what is it really an option that I would sit there and pay this, 17 times my allowance for this week to make this one phone call out to talk to this one person that I met in California? No.
We know we did something wrong. We were clearly stealing. But at the time, we're kids, and you just don't think that it's wrong. You don't connect. And so we were going, well, we're just using this we're using a code that belongs to a large corporation. They won't even notice. They probably have this happen all the time.
If you steal from
right.
a large
It's okay
company.
to steal from the large companies.
Suddenly I discovered I don't need to pay for my phone calls to call these BBSs. Now I can dial a 950, punch in a couple of digits here. I'm calling long distance. I'm saving money.
And the things we were doing with it were just merely promoting. We were connecting. How do we connect with somebody in Austin? I'm not going to pay $6 an hour to connect to somebody in Austin. I'll just,
How can I do that for
take
free?
a little bit out of my ethics here and use a Phreak code.
My parents, the next month, I remember my dad was like, so we have no long distance charges this month, but you're still using the computer just as much as you were last month. What's going on? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm just being a good boy.
Oh, Sonny. I always remember Oh, Sonny.
Oh, Sonny. It was a Phreak bulletin board up in New York.
It was spurred by a meeting of the Ohio Scientific Users Group of New York, which is what OSUNY stands for. Ohio Scientific was a company that made computers. I had one, and we decided it would be great to have a BBS for the users group. Turned out no one else in the Ohio Scientific group really had a modem, so they didn't call up, but other people called up, and some hackers kind of started to put some information on there, phone phreaks mainly.
It seemed like every freak in the nation was on this thing. I mean, to dial into it would take you hours just redialing to get into it.
There were a couple of people early on, Milo Phone Bill and Tom Tone. They were a couple of the early ones, and Mr. America also.
If you had any question, you posted it, and anywhere between an hour later to 3 days later, depending on whatever person dialed in, you'd have the right answer.
When someone would write something up, we would post it there, and that's how we got things like the black box and the blue box, and tips on phone phreaking, and various people who were really involved with the BBS, they'd write stuff. And it was a great forum to exchange that information. Anyone who called up could access it.
I think what was interesting being on OSUNY at the time was the Newsweek article. It came out and there was the name of a board that you're on almost every day mentioned in Newsweek and as a young teenager. It was just shocking.
It was pretty amazing that this guy wanted to write things like this. Oh yeah, big adventure factor there.
I'm an anarchist, look at me. What is it you're doing to promote anarchy? I'm an anarchist, look at me. That's all we were. It wasn't any actual plan, strategy, or anything to overthrow the government. It was just, that was the thing you did. You know, like people today getting their nose pierced. We were anarchists.
Right.
But it didn't mean anything.
The younger people at the time were like really into the anarchy stuff, and they were all under 18, and they were, you know, they were still indestructible. They were still willing to go out and do the crazy things in real life, and the rest of us were doing those kinds of crazy things, but kind of worried about it more than they were.
If you're 15 and you just learn how to write and you just learn how to publish to a global audience in the same month, you end up writing a lot of embarrassing stuff you can't retract. It sort of belongs to the world.
It never occurred to us not to write about something unless we were pretty sure we were going to get busted. But we were lonely kids, lonely teenagers. Some of us were lonely adults, or isolated for whatever reason. There were a lot of people in smaller communities who didn't have anybody else to talk to.
I made a pipe bomb or two in my day. That was a popular one.
You know, well, who else would we tell about it? Sometimes you go out and do something particularly crazy just so you could tell people about it.
At the time, there was this book, the Anarchist Cookbook, which was, you know, banned, and so we appreciated that it was a banned book. And so our goal was to take as much of the Anarchist Cookbook as we could, put it in electronic form without plagiarizing.
I mean, you want to write fiction. You want to write about making bombs or just being silly.
Yeah, messing up McDonald's. But
urine box plans.
We were also just into mischief, so anything that we could think of that was mischief, we would write a text file about it.
But you do it because you're, I guess, for the same reason teenagers hang out in clumps or people form companies. You know, you're just hanging out with your friends.
It was the first time any of us at that age had any way to publish anything that other people could read.
Yeah, they had text files that were written, and they talked. It's funny, these text files are written by other junior high kids, and they talk about stuff at their school. It'd be like some school in California, which is strangely familiar to, you know, our goofy stuff. It's like, there's no way you make those connections before. Like, this is a new thing. The early 80s was very exciting.
And I guess in retrospect, that improved all of our English skills.
Yeah, I'm sure you recall the Columbine incident.
Right.
And whenever that happened, I was at work, and I'm talking with some friends, and they're like, how could they not see that there's this group of teenagers walking around in black trench coats, talking about explosives, toting guns? How can they not see that this is a problem? And, you know, this isn't that long ago. And I was completely stunned because I thought everybody did that. I had a trench coat. I made explosives. I played with guns on the weekend. I didn't have any hate. And I think that was the thing that separated us. You know, I didn't hate anybody. I didn't hate my schoolmates. I didn't hate anybody. But we made explosives. We shot guns on the weekends. We had our black trench coats. We had T-shirts with anarchy on them. We were all of that stuff there. All the things that the Columbine kids were. Except that we didn't have any hatred. But it was a real eye-opener to think, you mean y'all, you know, my friends at work, you mean y'all didn't do this? And they're like, no. You did? And I said, maybe.
No,
Hold on.
not me.
I need to separate myself here and let me think about this before I answer the question. So,
I bought a game for my computer that wouldn't run. And I called the manufacturer, and the manufacturer said, I'm sorry, that copy protection apparently doesn't work right with that computer. So I took the software back, and they said, I'm sorry, you've opened the package. So we got together. And we cracked the protection so that I could play the game on the computer that they told me it would run on.
But see, there were other people out there cracking programs before us. We weren't the first. We just ended up being the best.
You just, you think?
It was such a challenge all the time, get the new software, go in, crack it. I mean, my head was stuck in coding all the time. I was thinking, zeros and ones and hexadecimal and, opcodes, operands and all that stuff nonstop.
Back then, the language of choice for the platform, because they were so slow, was assembly and machine language. So it was difficult to learn, but once you learned it, reading it was straightforward, really.
I picked it up so quickly, just with assembler and all that, and I was able to write all kinds of cool routines and programs, and then getting on the BBSes. And
now, at first it was just there's a new game out. Well, there's a cracked version, there's a non-cracked version. Well, how do you crack them? Well, you open up the manual on machine language on Apple II, and then find there's 3 others on the market, and then you read about this thing on somebody's bulletin board, and next thing you know, you're sort of an amateur.
It started with just neighborhood kids bringing me software, the regular retail box software from the store. Then I'd crack it.
A lot of people know how to copy software, but not a lot of people know how to actually crack it. And you had a lot of people in town that could crack it. If you could crack it, then everybody called you bored because you're the first to have it. And so it just kept growing and growing that way. I think that's how I saw it.
I can't recall anything other than maybe a couple of games being all that challenging. Although I know the software manufacturers spent an enormous amount of time and resources trying to copy protect this stuff, but to no avail.
Really, for us, it was getting the game as fast as we possibly could. If that meant overnighting the game from, Datasoft or Broderbund or whatever, we would do that, and then when we'd get it, we'd have it cracked by morning. That was our thing. And then we could post on our bulletin board that we had the game, and that was, if you could do that, you were first to town. You're the king of the hill. That was the whole deal.
Serious competition developed between different groups. These groups would compete with each other, and then with me as an individual, in getting out, these new wares and who can get it out first. Because ultimately, whoever got it out first, their version and their name by extension would be the one that dominated. And if somebody else tried to trade their later crack into the system, it would simply be overwhelmed by the avalanche of whoever got it out first. They started the avalanche.
We're using adult words now, but we were proud of the brand we were creating. I mean, that was a large part of it too.
MPG was a brand, that's for sure. Yeah, we didn't call it that back then, but yeah, it was a brand.
That's the best way to describe it. It was something that we were contributing towards and trying to build fame on.
I mean, the real sense of the word brand is you brand your horse, with a stick.
Yeah.
We were branding those wares with our logo,
Trying to create an identity.
Yep. You didn't care about the game so much anymore. It was more about being first.
Competition.
Yeah.
Classic hacking mentality racing.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were literally hungry. Literally. I mean, if somebody heard or knew that I had a new program I was working to crack, I was working on it, they knew. And I'd get calls nonstop. Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Can it go? And then it would just explode. It would go onto the BBSes in the download area. It would get traded right and left and absolutely everywhere.
We got a game. It was Buck Rogers. Remember when Buck Rogers, the TV show, came out? Mm-hmm. So right after that, there was an Apple II game called Buck Rogers. Wow. We got the game, and John was cracking it, and in the code was a message. If you're trying to crack this game, call this phone number. And we had the game a day or two, not even, and so John called him and said, "Hey, is this Buck?" Because that's what it said, call and ask for Buck. And the guy on the other end was like, "No way, you got it already?"
Stealing software isn't as personal as it used to be.
There's always the issue that, there's no difference between copying a piece of software and walking into a retail store and walking out with the box without paying for it. I mean, that's what they always tell you is. But it doesn't seem close to home when you do it.
But we were just a bunch of goofy kids, and so the software at the time was $39.95 or less.
And when you're a kid and you don't have any money and you want stuff, and it's there and it's free, and there's very little to no
repercussions that could possibly happen to you by, you know, being the small-time software copying.
There was hundreds of games, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games. And you download a game, you play it for a while, and you throw it away. And it wasn't even an option that you would have ever bought those. I remember thinking to myself, who would buy this? I remember thought that quite a bit.
I don't know how you could look at it. You know, and the laws were so goofy at that time that nothing applied. You know, there wasn't really anything too illegal about it. It might have been a copyright violation, but...
We never sold any of the stuff we made. That was a rule, almost an unwritten rule that we had. You know, never, there were pirate groups out there that would get it from us and then try to sell it to their friends. We hated that.
Yeah, that's a sin.
I don't think we really realized. I mean, we were fairly young at the time, and it was such an easy thing to do. You know, it wasn't like stealing something at the store and walking out and, you know, thinking I've done something wrong. It was, oh, I can get a copy of that game just by doing, you know, step ABC. Great, I'll do it because I want to get that game.
Nobody ever thinks they're going to get caught, or nobody would ever commit a crime. You know, you're never going to be the one who gets caught. It's somebody else. So there's some fear of it, but there was also, you know, when you're 15 years old, you pretty much feel that you're invincible.
They can't bust everybody, you know what I mean? And that's sort of everybody's mentality, like they think they're untouchable.
We heard rumors of boards being shut down. And it was just rumors because I didn't know anybody personally. I couldn't pick up the phone and call them. That this board was taken down by the sheriff's department last night.
My co-SysOps job was to run fucking hacker all day and get me as many codes as he wants. I didn't want to run it because I didn't want to get in trouble.
We were hiding stuff in cereal boxes so that if they went through our trash, they wouldn't find it because it's inside the cereal box. And there was more than one occasion where we were sure we had been busted. Right. You know, they were saying, oh yeah, and you guys are next. They know about you. And we were terrified. And we were kids. We didn't know that they can't come knocking at our door for what we had said.
At least at the time, so.
And he used to give me all these codes every day. We had a whole system where he'd put the codes into this area in my bulletin board. My bulletin board would use the codes. And then one day the police came to his house. They confiscated his computer, his monitor, all his printers, all this stuff. The worst part wasn't that he lost all of his computer stuff because of it. The worst part was that, like his parents, you know, I mean, he was 13, and his parents were like, "What the hell are you doing?" You know.
And I remember one night, us burning. I mean, because we lived out in the country, we had a burn barrel. Right. So we went out and we grabbed everything we had. We grabbed all our printouts. Mm-hmm. We grabbed everything that was, because we had heard one of our friends got busted. And we took it outside, and my parents, they had to have known something was up. Because it's, 11 o'clock at night, and we're out there burning stuff. And they're
stolen everything.
And I just keep thinking, my parents sitting there reading the book, what are the kids doing? Oh, they're out there burning evidence. What do you think they're doing? And they just didn't even, no red flags at all.
And like, we didn't ever think it was a really big deal. And I don't think it was a big deal. I mean, maybe it was, $12 worth of calls a week or something like that. But it was a big enough deal that when they tried to really crack down on that kind of thing, they cracked down on it.
What we're talking about is stuff that was never told in articles. You can talk about this BBS or that BBS or this person or that person and about this specific thing, but a lot of people never covered the philosophy behind it or the mentality.
They weren't doing this because it was cool. They were doing it because they didn't have anywhere else to go where people understood them. These were people that they could connect with long distance or medium distance over the phone line. That was a culture. It was not pretentious. Absolute. It was real.
People were talking about hackers as being these evil little uncontrollable kids who were messing up these established infrastructure systems to the point of anarchy, and anarchy alone.
It was focused on kids breaking into corporate computer systems, shadowy hackers, there's a bit of sensationalism to it.
It wasn't to do anything destructive or to steal anything or break things. It was to get in and explore.
And yet in the media, people were just lambasting hackers as being the devil. And it was really, really frustrating.
Back then, no one knew what they were doing with, that is, the authorities didn't really know what they were doing because, like hacking into a computer, well, what kind of crime is that? What did they steal,
What being a computer hacker is about is being 15 years old
having an excess of brains and hormones. You know, it's like it's just basically being a teenager and wanting to like make mischief and learn stuff and you know, be curious and stuff like that.
When you're 15 and 14, you don't have a car, you don't have a girlfriend, you got nothing but time, right? Especially during the summer, no school. So you've literally got, you know, 18 hours a day to just explore, you know?
It's like a, you know, totally fits in with just being a male teenager.
I think that's why you see these kids, 15-year-old kids, you know, in Europe hacking DVDs. I mean, thank God for those kids, right? Because they don't have anything better to do. No car, no girlfriend. That's just what they do.
That original period was really unprecedented. You know, I mean, obviously now you can say the current situation of the hacker underground is, it's the evolution of that original time. But that original time was so original. It had never been done before. I think it's the first generation of, you know, 13 to 17-year-old kids to be so empowered.
Because that was the whole point of the bulletin board thing, was to find out what the new game was, or you know, or you know, that was for me anyway, because all you wanted to do was get the latest and greatest video game, you know, for the Apple II. That was the big reason why bulletin boards existed.
My mother, I mean, she passed away 2 years ago in a car accident, but the last several years that we were talking about it, like the 4 years previous to that, we started talking about those days because I was 13 and the feds were coming by, and I never wanted to bring it up again, especially when it happened 2 more times. But she told me later that she thought it was the greatest thing, and she would tell all her friends at work how smart her son was to break into the Pentagon and do these things and be visited upon by the FBI, who she never met before.
That was the big game. It was a competition to get who could get there first.
Yeah.
You know, whoever could crack it first, you'd have your name up in lights. 20 years later, now we're getting it in lights, but you know, here's the lights.
By putting out all the knowledge that is discovered, okay, you're going to get more and more people coming in. And sure, 99 out of 100 might be worthless idiots. 999 out of 1,000 may not last as a hacker for a year. Only 1 out of 10,000 may ever make it to a decent hacker status. But you know what? If you're educating millions and millions of 13-year-olds with their first computer, and every night they're over there on a computer trying to hack into this or that, I mean, you have a thing that can never be stopped. Take 1 million new kids and give them all the information in the world. Let history decide who becomes what.
I woke up one morning and I needed to catch an airplane, and I had at that point a 300 megabyte SCSI drive that was a good solid drive, and I went downstairs and it had an error, and I remember thinking, I've got to get to the airport, I can't fool with this right now, and I leaned over and I flipped the switch, and that was the end.
My daily ritual was to go by, make sure the machine was happy, and see what the caller count was today. And, you know, as the numbers just kept creeping off and off and off and off, I said, you know, at what point is this an anachronism? You know, it's there as a, you know, a living chunk of history, but it's not really serving a purpose. One day, something flaked out. I don't know if a memory chip went, but the machine fell over, and I just kind of went, it's time.
And I think we were having dinner at Outback one night, and I kind of, was thinking, I don't feel like running the board anymore. And my friends were like, well, it's up to you, man.
It wasn't like a planned shutdown when I shut it down. It was, I had a disk crash, and of course you never had the backups that you should have. And
when it finally got down to about 5 calls a day, going from, 40 plus calls a day per node down to 5 for everything, it just didn't seem worth it anymore. When you came in the family room and, still sitting there with a little snoring phone going on, it's like, okay.
Lack of traffic. First he dropped one phone line, then he dropped the other.
This used to be, there was always somebody on it. So that definitely took a lot of the will to do anything with it out of it.
He said, oh, we don't have enough traffic to constitute 2 phone lines anymore. And then we don't have enough traffic to constitute 1. And that was like a sad day in my book.
Once you've discovered the internet, and even when BBSes were still going strong, you knew that it was the future. In fact, it became readily apparent that the only function that a BBS would have at that time would be so that you could access the larger internet.
One day I walked in and the guy was using Netscape 1 or something. I was like, hey, what's that? He's like, oh, I'm just using Netscape to get on the web. It's like, what? And he said, don't tell me you've never gotten on the internet. I was like, no, what's it all about?
I think the last time I went on a BBS, it was actually a rant going, you guys have to get on the internet.
He's like, oh my God. And he called everybody over. We have an internet virgin here.
Once I got onto the net, my BBSs were history.
Hindsight kind of morphs things, but it seems like over a period of about a month, you just saw everybody just walking off and going to the internet.
At that point I said, there's really no purpose to BBSs anymore, and the BBSs just died instantly.
We didn't know anything about the internet. Some of our customers had been saying, you should really start looking into this. You guys are modem guys, This thing's going to happen whether you like it or not, and you're in a good position.
Yeah, but I didn't think that it was going to go away so fast.
I didn't think it would, but I wasn't surprised.
I was surprised. I mean, it died within, 6 months? I'd say that we went from bringing in thousands of dollars for selling packages that we brought in almost nothing.
I remember having a chart of the sales of Searchlight BBS, and right after the 1995 BBS convention, that's when it all went to hell. We just weren't selling bulletin boards anymore. Nobody wanted them anymore. I think that's when everybody kind of woke up and said, bulletin boards aren't anything anymore. Now there's the internet.
To a certain degree, anyone who's involved in the BBS world comes across these magic pundits who ran around in 1998 saying the web is changing everything, and went, no shit.
The bulletin board system was at its maximum. I think it was 280 lines. And yeah, what we were doing is we would put up 10 modems as a test for the internet access, and they were immediately full. And so we figured, well, our test has been complete. Our customers want this stuff. We put 10 more up. They were immediately full. And so we just kept adding 10 lines and 10 lines. We knew that this internet thing was really not just a flash in the pan.
The classic comment, and I didn't even recognize it at the time, there was a big thing. Somebody gave a presentation every Thursday. We would just have a little lunch presentation. Somebody would talk about some topic, and somebody was talking about the internet. And a big argument broke out in the hallway outside, and the owner of the company was arguing with my friend Colin, and the owner went, this internet thing, it's just a fad. 2 years from now, it'll be gone. And of course, I didn't recognize it at the time, but Colin sort of walked up to me after. He goes, no, I think it's the other way around.
Out of the ashes of those bulletin boards emerged about 5,000 internet service providers. And it happened like this. We like to think that the internet service providers sort of sprung forward fully grown, and they were MSN and they were Prodigy and they were all of that. But Didn't happen that way.
Any of the BBS operators that I knew added internet capability as it became possible.
They added the listservs and internet email. Then they added gateways that allowed you to go to the World Wide Web.
More and more of our customers were paying for the bulletin board system and a subscription to the internet. And then, we started noticing people just buying the internet and, what do I need this bulletin board system for anymore?
And so most BBSs transitioned so that they were a BBS with the internet, and then they were BBS internet, and then they were an internet service with a BBS attached. And some BBSs survive to this day on that basis. They're web-based or they're independent dial-up online services.
And it simply evolved that way. All the internet service providers that we wrote for in the end were the same guys. In most cases, using much of the same equipment in the same rooms.
Our friends here in Dulles, Virginia, America Online, most people don't realize, started as a 7-line BBS right here in the Reston area. America Online grew to take the dominant position now in the internet, but has never really given up its online service BBS kind of look and sense.
I coined the term internet service provider. We made a lot of the words that you use up in my office. So I never did see the break. In fact, I still have to reject the entire line of argument that there ever was one. It was names of things changed and they evolved as they went along.
I don't understand a strong motivation to run a bulletin board system that isn't networked. Because if it's not networked somehow, then no one can get to it, in which case it's not a very interesting system. If you believe people should be able to get to it, I don't understand why there isn't a perfectly reasonable coexistence where it's plugged into the internet to get to that community. And it could also be dial-up. I mean, there's no reason why you have to see this as somehow distinguishing.
The Luddites who used to lay down in front of the machinery in the Middle Ages to try and stop the mechanisation of industry, they never were capable of appreciating what was going to happen in the future.
I realized that the internet has clearly made bulletin boards an evolutionary dead end.
And I think that's exactly the same with those people that felt that BBSs were going to have any future at all in an internet age.
They're like memory typewriters, it's like it was sort of a good idea and it sort of worked, but the concept of computers and word processors has completely subsumed any true value to a memory typewriter you could find.
It seems nostalgic, like something was lost, and I don't want to sound cheesy and like our innocence was lost or anything silly like that, but it seems like a certain sense of community or like of camaraderie or something was lost.
You don't have a community anymore because the person may be, across the country. You're never going to meet them. You're not going to know them. Whereas with BBSs, basically, somebody could announce on a BBS one day, hey, let's meet over at Joe's Pizza on Saturday. Everybody know where Joe's Pizza was, and they all go over there and meet.
One of the things that always attracted me the most to bulletin board systems in general was the sense of community fostered by a smaller, more close-knit group of people who always came to the same place. And so you kind of got to know these people.
There's just so many people out there, and it's just so vast, and it's so far-reaching.
You can bring up things like the World Wide Web, or probably more appropriately Usenet, as analogs to the bulletin board system. But when you have a Usenet news group that has 25,000 messages in it, posted by 5,000 people and another 30,000 people just reading, you very quickly lose that sense of close community.
It's not like, hey, why don't you come on over? Well, I live in Japan. That would be why I can't just come on over.
On a forum, you have a sense that you're like this tiny little ant that could get swept away at any time and it'll still be there.
Right.
And stuff.
The web seems like it's a layer of separation between you and what you're doing.
This is really a serious problem I find on the internet. It's that people have the attitude that if you can do it, then it's okay to do it.
I think the percentage of idiots is the same now as it was back then, but if you have 20,000 people instead of 50 people on a board, you're just going to have that many more idiots.
When you reduce everything down to numbers and, you know, funky letters on the screen, you're not letting people get involved with it. And, you know, most of the stuff on the internet, they don't care if you're involved or not.
So it feels more like one-sided. Like somebody put this together to serve to you. So you look at it more passively, maybe.
A website today, it's not, I don't know, it's not a solid of a connection.
I didn't like the fact that the internet was available to everybody. Like I wanted it to be like just not a select few, but it wasn't just about being the smart kid anymore. It's just everybody could be the smart kid.
I was the only person who really understood this aspect of life, and now it's become so pervasive that I find that actually I'd almost rather discuss anything else.
Once upon a time, we used to say that 1,000,000 monkeys on 1,000,000 typewriters would eventually produce all of the works of William Shakespeare. Now, however, thanks to the internet, we know this is not true.
Some people check it out and they bail because the pace is not fast enough for them. And other people hang around and they'll call in maybe once a month, maybe once 6 months, maybe once a year.
I could have shut the BBS down 4 years ago. I didn't, because I couldn't see it. I mean, even down to 50 users, I couldn't.
They'll ask a question. There'll be people that'll ask a question about things that they can't find out on the net. You know, how do I do this? And I don't want 19 million spam messages coming back at me because my email address got harvested.
The kids, well, they're about old enough now. We're going to use that as their training ground before we turn them loose on the internet. Their training ground is going to be working through the BBS.
Hang tough. Just hang tough and see what comes out. The other thing is curiosity. What is it going to be next? Can we make what we are now survive the next, whatever the next big thing is? Can we integrate what it is we have now into whatever that becomes?
You definitely not maybe. I know from talking to you guys more than once, you wonder, why am I doing this? Is it impacting my relationship with my significant other? Is it impacting my work? Is it impacting other aspects of my life? My BBS has been kind of running since '87, and for people get into nostalgia, whatever you want to call it, want to come back and visit it, and they know they can still find it there at relatively the same number or a number they can access. You know, realistically, I'm not doing this for my callers because I don't have that many more. I'm really doing this for myself because I enjoy the technical challenge and I enjoy seeing it work. And I also realize that I'm going to get excited about it for a short period of time, and then I'm going to cool off on it.
We're lucky. We're still, you know, I think the only reason that we are still running BBS is because we like to get together.
Yeah, it is group therapy.
We have almost nothing in common aside from the fact that we run these BBSes that hardly anybody ever calls anymore.
I have people that maybe called my BBS 5 years ago that drop in, fill out a new user form, and just call a couple of times, see what's going on.
They get their nostalgia fix, they go away, they come back another year or two later.
Yeah.
Thank goodness there's not a 12-step program for BBS.
Right. Every now and then.
So hunting around on eBay, I was searching for anything with Commodore in the title, and I found something called the Commodore VIC 1011A. It gives your Commodore computer a real COM port on the back, like a PC would have. So you can very trivially do a null modem connection between the Commodore and your PC. Now on top of that, I've been really getting into TCP/IP stacks and communications technologies at my day job, and just an idea I've been toying around with. Wasn't much more than an experiment. Does this work? Yeah, it works. Oh, that's kind of fun. The software only took me 2 evenings to write. Tried calling it. It works. And that's kind of neat. Tried calling it from my desk at work. Yeah, that's pretty neat. I can call on Commodore, from my Windows workstation at work. In jest, I said if I get 20 people calling it, I expected 10 or so, then I'll leave it up for a couple of months. And as of actually I just checked it about 10 minutes ago, and I've had 1,150 callers. There's certainly a lot of nostalgia that the callers are experiencing. I've got dozens of SysOps feedback messages that people have left. They'll call the board once, and they'll log out, and how when many BBSes you log out, it says send feedback to SysOps, and everyone pretty much 100% say yes and say, this is neat, you've brought back some really good memories of my youth back in the 80s. Thank you, and then they disappear and I never hear from them again.
The day I shut my BBS down, I put the whole thing on those 2 tapes. And a few years later, like this year actually, I went to go and restore my tapes and found out that they're bad and I can't get my data back off them, so my whole BBS is gone. I don't know. I was able to sleep at night because I knew if I ever wanted my board back, I figured in 5 or 10 years I'd restore it and maybe even put it back up and run it again. I figured that I was set, and then when the time came and I decided that I wanted to restore my BBS to look at some of my old ANSI screens and all that, and old mail and stuff like that, and it was gone, I was so devastated. I couldn't believe it.
As the whole bunch of us have gotten older, we've grown up, but we haven't outgrown the BBS. Dial-up is dead. That paradigm has gone away. People do not drop their internet connection and dial into a BBS anymore. That whole single-user online thing, yes, it's dead. The BBS lives on.
I don't think we're actually anywhere near the end of the bulletin board. We are long past the end of the dial-up bulletin boards.
Yes, it's a dead thing. No, it isn't. It's only dead if you dismiss it as such.
The BBSes that tried to stay exactly the way they were, they've become extinct. But the ones that observed the changes that were happening, the way people access computers and information services online, that got onto the internet, that moved with the tide, with the currents, and actually adopted all the new technology, they've moved forward. They're still going strong. This is where you go when you want to find the real content, when you want to find the real people. The BBS is not dead by any means.